Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the World Tour Racing Club 4-Hour Series 2021. It's round 3, and today we're here at Le Mans in France for the second half of the season to get underway. I'm your host, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and it's good to be back with the WTRC crowd as we're looking to get underway with this third round. And indeed, we have got a lot on the agenda tonight, particularly with regards to the championship battle and also a very difficult challenge on the hands of a good number of drivers here. Now, we'll come on to that all specifically in a second, but I should point out to you we are running a little bit behind schedule at the moment. We have been experiencing some technical issues with regards to lobby. We can see there, for example, that SDM Viper is having some difficulty, as is Netabas, in being able to join and have a stable connection to the room. So we may be experiencing some slight technical changes or some readjustments over the coming minutes. We'll wait and see and keep you informed of those, of course. But given the fact we have had some technical difficulties and are currently running approximately 19 minutes behind schedule, we've got a 10-minute window until qualifying gets underway. So what's going to be the format of tonight, of course, you may ask? Well, the format is as follows. Our drivers right now are going through their final practice session in 10 minutes' time, so at 6:30, so at 6:30 our time, we will be getting underway with qualifying, which is a 15-minute session, and then once qualifying is complete, we get underway with the first half of the 4-hour endurance race. Now, I say the first half because the way this series runs for the uninitiated is that it's split into two halves, two 2-hour halves, where the first half is Lobby A, which we're broadcasting here, and then Lobby B will follow, as will be broadcast by THG's Tom79, who is the race steward and director for this lobby, and he'll immediately be jumping into the commentary role for Lobby B that follows immediately afterwards. The idea being that at the end of 2 hours, how the drivers finish at the end of the 2-hour window is how the grid will be set up for the purposes of Lobby B, which will have a rolling start, whereas here we will have a grid start, and then all of our drivers will get underway in that second half according to the rolling start and continue from where they left off, albeit the gaps between drivers will have been cut down to the rolling start gaps rather than the gaps we will see at the end of Lobby A, whether it's an entire lap or alternatively 10 seconds, it gets contracted down to the rolling start distance. Now, that's the overall structure, of course. This series is made up of 4 rounds, so we are entering that second half, as I've previously mentioned. And it's now time for us to jump down to the circuit side and reintroduce the drivers who are participating in Lobby A tonight and the teams that are participating as a result, and give you an update on how they're performing right now in the overall championship standings. Now, as we go back to our briefer notes, we're going to be starting from top to bottom, of course. And we'll start off with our championship leaders as they currently stand in P1, and that is the Humble Guys. And that is the combination of THG's Muller and TS040. Now, Muller is the driver in Lobby 8. You can see Muller making his way out of what is known as Arnage. And as he makes his way down the long run towards the Porsche curves here, the South African driver running in the Aston Martin DBR9 GT1 from 2010. Having had a good run the team last time out at Bathurst, they're looking to continue that momentum. And whilst they haven't been overall dominant in terms of the first 2 rounds, they have started to carve themselves out a small lead of 6 points over the second place drivers who are making up Team Speed Demon. Now, Speed Demon consists of Cy Potter 5 and SDM Viper, and SDM Viper is the driver who you will see representing them in Lobby A tonight if he is able to join the lobby. He's been having some connectivity issues so far, so we're hopeful that Viper is able to get those resolved with the time remaining. Then in third currently in the championship standings on 59 points is the hybrid racing team of Tom79 and Pepsi GT. Tom79, of course, is in the lobby right now, and you can see he's parked up just here. And Tom representing the Belgian nationality here, the Belgian driver running out in the Aston Martin DBR9 at GT1 as well. The Aston Martins being our top 4 teams so far. We are seeing the Aston Martins running away with things a little bit, but of course there is plenty more up for grabs tonight. It's not as though the Aston Martins are going to have it all their own way. Although at this circuit it may be the case that the DBR9 is going to be the dominant car. We will wait and see. Then down in fourth place in the championship standings at the moment is the team HPSR, and that is the combination of Don Siegel and also Evo Tropic, albeit Evo Tropic is not available for Lobby B tonight, so this man right here, the Austrian of Don Siegel, will be racing at both Lobby A and Lobby B, so he'll be putting in the full 4 hours as split into the 2-hour races, and we wish him all the best, of course, because that is going to be one test of stamina, and they're on those 51 points at the moment and being very closely pursued by Team IMB in P5, and that is the combination of Kawajo and a Boki 2006 ZG. And we have got Kawajo representing in Lobby A here, Boki will be in Lobby B, the Belgian driver in the BMW M6 GT3 M-Power. And remember last time at Bathurst, the BMW M6s were a little bit of a surprise in terms of the cars out on the circuit. They weren't necessarily the fastest as Kawajo retreats to the pits, but they were the cars that did seem to have a good amount of consistency and stability to them, and longevity in the race as well, particularly where fuel was a concern. Then in P6 right now, we've got OJRT SG Racing, the team who will not be participating tonight. Unfortunately, both drivers were not able to make it. On 43 points, we expect them to drop a little bit down the order. And then we come down to P7 on 39 points, and that is Team Ram Racing, consisting of Maurice Garage, who will be in Lobby B, and Enrico Playborst, who will be in Lobby A. And that is Enrico right here, the Mercedes driver from the Netherlands, making his way out all the way down towards Indianapolis right now in the Mercedes AMG. And really, that is the sequence at the moment. The Aston Martin dominating the top 4 positions, then BMWs in P5 and P6, then you've got the Mercedes AMGs in P7 and also P8. And speaking of P8, we come over to Team Polywords, who will have THG Danker from the United States. Here's the man in question on screen right now, making his way down towards Indianapolis. He is standing in tonight for THG Waterskin, who has been excluded due to a number of penalties, I believe, being picked up over the course of the last 2 rounds. As a result, they have substituted Danker in for Waterskin as part of the racing rules. They're allowed to do that, so it'll be Danker representing Polywords tonight, and it'll be a Mike 65 who represents the team in Lobby B. You then got to go down to P9, where you've got on 32 points right now JRT Crazy Dampers, the team being represented of course by the combination of Dimmy Crazy Dampers in Lobby B, and you've also got Netta Bass in Lobby A. And Netta Bass is our driver here. He's the first of our Lexus drivers running the RCF GT3 prototype as produced by Emil Through Racing, and the 2016 car very strong on the straights, as we did see at Bathurst, and we look forward to seeing what Netta's able to do with this car, particularly in the long run down the Mulsanne straight with the chicanes breaking it up. We've then got in P10 on what is 31 points right now. We have got OJRT LF Racing. They're not able to participate tonight. They're a Mercedes AMG representative. And then in P11, so that was, sorry, my apologies, the combination of OJRT Bethman and Smoky Land not able to participate tonight. Then in P11, we have got the THC crew of Scalios and also Devlin Calypso, and it will be Devlin Calypso who is racing in Lobby A. The Belgian driver here making his way up into Dunlop chicane right now as we're about to get qualifying underway, representing Aston Martin with the V12 Advantage GT3. And then you've got the THG Academy, which consists of Belkin for Port Hub. We'll be referring to him as Belkin from this point onwards, and RGR Cesaru. Belkin, as we'll see very shortly, is in Lobby A, whereas his teammate Cesaru will be in Lobby B. Now, Belkin is the British driver who is in the Mercedes AMG here, and we heard a little bit from Belkin before tonight. What he was saying is he felt that going into this race, he hasn't been able to find the lap times of the leaders that he's seen in the practice sessions, but he's going to look to work some magic potentially on the strategy side tonight. We saw last time at Bathurst it was all about a huge chase right at the end of the race, as we're hearing that we are experiencing a pit bug for one of our drivers. I think it's Muller who's experiencing a pit bug, so we're still getting some technical gremlins. It may be the case that qualifying is cancelled and restarted. Alternatively, we see that perhaps Muller ends up starting in the back of the field. So we're going to get the restart. In fact, we are going to be taking a restart here, but it's not working out. But that does give us just a little bit more time to introduce some drivers as qualifying gets shut down. So we back out of qualifying. And the THG Academy, remember they started only in round 2. They've got a solid 19 points on the board, so they've already jumped themselves up to P12. And last but not least, tonight it will be a UNEM OJRT Racing, or UNEM Racing I should say, and that is the combination of UNEM's Devil, who would be in Lobby B, and OJRT's Flying Riku, who is in Lobby A. But unfortunately, I've been informed that Riku will not be able to race tonight, and I do believe that the team will not be able to participate, although we are waiting to see whether we will have Devil out on the circuit. But we cannot see him currently, so I believe that team may not be taking part, or if Devil is racing, he'll be in Lobby B and he'll be starting right out of the right at the back of the grid. But those are our orders, and we do have confirmation that SDN Viper is able to join, so that's great news. The American will be racing tonight, and of course SDN Viper, we saw him last time out, he coming in that second place, if I remember correctly, at Bathurst. Not able to take the fight for the win in Lobby A, but a very good effort all the same. And Viper, of course, representing Speed Demon, and he will be their Lobby A driver. So everybody's getting readied up. Muller's going to be leaving the lobby and then returning to see if he can get rid of the pit bug. But that is the story in terms of the championship so far, and really nobody able to break away in the championship as it currently stands after 2 rounds. Good points up for grabs, of course, and remember the way points are distributed is based on our drivers' finishing positions at the end of each half of the race, and that is pulled together to create an overall final total score from each race. But the drivers who really have been, or the teams that have really been on top so far, have been our top 2 teams of the Humble Guys and Speed Demon, and it could be argued really that they have been the runaway teams, and then it's been down to everybody else competing for P3. But of course we have very different circuits on display. We've now got Le Mans, which is a much different challenge from what we previously saw at Spa in round 1 and Bathurst in round 2. And you may be thinking at this point, well, how is it a different challenge? Well, the thing with this circuit in particular is that firstly, you've now got a circuit which has 2 very distinct halves to it. The first half is all about power. The second half is all about handling. And really the halfway point, it could be argued, is the entry point into Indianapolis, which we'll talk about when we go round on board with one of our drivers for a guided lap. But really that's where the circuit splits into 2, and as a result of that, with it being a very long circuit, it can be a very taxing circuit on our drivers. And the last consideration, of course, is the fact that we are running slightly different tyre and fuel consumption settings. Now, we have not changed the rules in terms of our drivers have the racing soft, the racing medium and the racing hard available to them. That is standard practice, as we're hearing that if anybody experiences any issues in qualifying from this point onwards, we will not be restarting qualifying. They will be made to start at the back. But what I can tell you is that in terms of rule changes, we have different tyre and fuel consumption settings. And what are those changes, you may ask? Well, fuel use this time is only ×1. So that means for every lap of fuel, for every lap done, it will be a lap of fuel consumed. And hello there, Illusions. Hope you're doing well, and I hope you're doing well as well. So I'm doing well okay here. Thank you very much, my friend. I hope you're having a good weekend so far. So we have ×1 fuel, which means for every lap done, that is simulated as a single lap of fuel usage. And tyre wear, instead of it being a much higher setting, it's now ×2 as we try to get qualifying underway once again, which means for every lap done, it's the equivalent of 2 laps worth of tyre wear. And that means that our drivers will be able to go longer on their stints in this 2-hour race. Without further ado, we get the formal qualifying session underway. So all of our drivers will of course be looking to get out the pits as quickly as possible here, given the fact they've only got 15 minutes and the lap around here is just under 4 minutes. That gives them a very limited period of time in which to get qualifying laps in. Now, one of the things which will be a concern for a lot of drivers is that the Aston Martin DBR9 in particular can be tuned to be very strong around the circuit. Indeed, it's a very strong car in Group 3 where tuning is permitted, and we are running in balance of performance, as set by Polyphony Digital within the Group 3 category, but we have tuning available, which means that the cars you would typically see in an FIA race, which are very strong, such as the Aston Martin V12 Vantage, as driven by Devlin Calypso here, may not be as strong because we can unlock the capabilities of the cars that have been force-tuned by Polyphony Digital to perhaps be weaker. So, for example, the Aston Martin DBR9 is by default tuned to be weaker according to the balance of performance by Polyphony Digital for FIA races, because it is the older of the Aston Martins, and the overall rule of thumb is that the older cars are made weaker or more polar in terms of their tunes, whereas the more modern cars are made better all-rounders and stronger cars as a result. But as Calypso's making its way down here, that will be the consideration, of course, is that certain cars, and also remember the Lexus RCF prototype, as is being driven by, if we remember correctly, Annetta Bass, will be extremely strong down the straights here. So that's what our drivers will be wary of. And if they can get a tow down the run through the Mulsanne Straight, and of course in the run to Indianapolis, that is going to benefit them no end in terms of lap time. So everybody will be looking out for little bits of tow and looking for ways to get that advantage over the drivers around them. As we say hello to Sweet Lerb in the chat, and we hope you're doing well, Lerb. And we are now just getting everybody down to the second part of the Mulsanne Straight right now. They're onto that second third of it, I should say. But what I can tell you immediately is that Netta Bass is holding back a little bit here, deciding not to go along with the pack, but instead coming out of the pits a bit later, as everybody has been able to get out of the pits. And indeed, as we just hear from THGTS 040, who I believe is THG's TS040 who'll be racing in Lobby B, saying this race will be interested as the old strategies go out the window. Indeed, what are the fact we have a much gentler fuel consumption and tyre wear here. It will be about extending those stints as much as possible and trying to simply get the life out of the car here. And I'm hearing rumours down at the paddock that some drivers may be looking at just a one stop, so pitting on the hour over the course of the race. But to get there, you need a good qualifying position, because whilst it is a long track around here, if you find yourself down the back and say 10 seconds down come the end of the first few laps before you go into the pit, and given the fact that the pit time here is extremely long, it's one of the longest on the GT Sport calendar, it can be a case that as a result you find yourself out of contention for the win or the podium before you've even had a chance to strike. We see Enrico Playballs right now at the head of the entire pack here, making his way through Indianapolis, then getting a nice run through there, and still on a warm-up lap, mind you. And remember, all of our drivers do have fuel in these cars, and they do have the tyre wear settings on. We're not running artificial settings for the purposes of qualifying here. So if our drivers do want to do fuel burning at all, they can opt to do so, but otherwise they're encouraged to push around and get as many laps in as possible. And indeed, with the times one tyre wear here, I think tyre degradation in qualifying is not going to be too much of an issue unless somebody makes a major mistake. But what you can see already, here's SDM Viper, the American in the V12 Vantage, who we spoke about earlier on in the programme, making his way into the Porsche curves right now, sort of contesting the situation with Devlin Calypso here. Neither driver really wanting to give the other one the ability to be the lead driver as such, and you can see in fact Viper stuck behind Calypso and the two of them tripping over one another, and as a result of that I think this is going to compromise them both in the final warm-up phase of their qualifying laps. As we look a little bit further back, and we can see Don Siegel, the Austrian, now catching up to the pair of them as well, albeit just a little bit laggy there, and the car's shaking around, and Calypso and Viper flashing their lights. But looking further up front then, it's going to be Enrico Playballs who will be the first driver to take us onto a flying lap, and we're going to ride on board with the Dutchman as he takes us around for a fast and furious lap. So here we go, coming out of the second of the Ford chicanes and going up through the gears, crossing that timeline onto his opening qualifying lap, going up towards fifth gear, and he's going to be absolutely putting that throttle through the floor right now, not going up into sixth gear come turn one here, now coming up into the Dunlop chicane, flat out and in heavy into a braking zone. He'll be braking down through the gears here, coming down to second, cutting a nice bit of the opening apex there, but making sure not to get too greedy on the second apex of the Dunlop chicane to not pick up a time penalty. Now he's got the long run down through 4 and 5 up towards the second chicane here, a third gear chicane left into right, and you'll see he's going to come down through those gears into fourth gear, holding in a higher gear here to give stability, and then making his way through, hitting one of the bollards here, now come up into Tetra Rouge, the corner that makes or breaks the first half of the lap, and you'll see he'll cut as much apex as possible. Very well collected there by the Dutchman, by Enrico, and now he's got the long run down towards the first of the Mulsanne chicanes, absolutely pounding the car all the way down towards that first braking zone, just building up the speed here, and you can see that he has extended fourth and fifth gear to try and get as high up into the speed as possible. 159 miles an hour was when he upshifted to sixth gear there, and you can note again that he's really building up that speed now, getting up to 171, and he'll be braking at approximately 173 miles an hour as he goes into the Mulsanne chicane here, braking down nice and hard, flying it through and going a bit deep, again a little bit too adventurous on this opening flying lap, but trying to find the grip, and it wasn't quite there under braking, but still, that'll cost him about 2 to 3 tenths of a second, but this is still an okay opening lap, and he'll be wary of the fact that the grip wasn't there, and he needs to move his braking zone back just a tiny bit as he now charges down towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes. As we say hello to Zuronic in the chat, and we're hearing that it's a pity that the OJRT teams weren't able to all make it as they've got some fantastic liveries. Well, indeed, that's a good point, and we do hope to see them in round number 4. But focusing back on Enrico, coming into the braking zone now, coming down from 169 miles an hour this time, a little bit less of an acceleration zone than the previous run from Tetra Rouge up to the first of the chicanes, but very well collected there, and Enrico not making the same mistake twice, you'll notice, and instead collecting that chicane very nicely. Now he's got one more chicane to go, and a long run here down towards the Mulsanne corner. Now this corner is one of those ones which catches you out because it looks so far away when you need to brake for it, and you think that you shouldn't be braking as early as you do, but trust me, you're going to see that Enrico's going to brake quite early for this corner and then run onto that apex curve. Here he goes onto the opening braking curve then, and going down through the gears and just going a little bit deep, and in fact having to do an emergency downshift there to first gear. That wasn't the downshift he would have wanted, that was to stop the car, and as a result that will cost him a further 2 to 3 temps as he now accelerates down towards Indianapolis. He goes down the Toyota straight here, as some people like to refer to it, because the Toyota billboard's a little bit further back. You've got the Rolex ones then, and then you've got the Toyota hybrid boards coming up right now. We're building up the speed once again, and as he comes down toward Indianapolis, now this is all about bravery at this point. He needs to nail the braking zone upon turning for Indianapolis and just get it set up for the left-hander. Going into the corner, then he's going to lift off the throttle and then stamp as hard as possible on the brakes after going through the right-hander. And as he goes through the left-hander, very nicely collected there and absolutely plants it on the throttle on exit, gets it very nicely done. Now coming into Arnage, another difficult corner here because there's a risk of you going too deep by braking too late. And he goes down to first gear, hits the rev limiter a little bit there, and I'm wondering whether Enrico should actually be using second there to get the better acceleration out of the corner. I think he just needs to think about it a little bit more. As you'll notice, he's starting to get a little bit aware on those left-hand tyres. You can see it on the telemetry in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. That won't cost him too much time going on to another flying lap shortly, but his third flying lap will be the one that's compromised a little bit by that. Now into the Porsche curves here. This is all about collecting your lines. As he goes into the first right-hander, just misses a little bit the apex curve there, but kept it tight. Now into a left-hander, and he's going to follow it through to another left-hander right now. And you'll see he's going to now start playing around with the throttle a little bit, bringing in the brakes as well to get it down to fourth gear, just cut a little bit of speed. Now into the final of this sequence as he goes into that left-hander, throwing the car at the corner there, and very nicely done by Enrico, keeping it right on the racing line, and now charging all the way down to the Ford chicanes. He's only got 4 more corners to go, but these are some of the most difficult ones, simply because of the fact you've had such a long lap, and now you can throw the entire lap away. Through the first chicane he goes, making it as straight as possible, and then into the second chicane, you'll see that he's got Viper getting very close to him, and he makes an absolute hand fist there of the final chicane, and Viper collects the rear of him as a result. So Enrico having a very difficult end to lap there, as you can see that he set a not a 4 minute, he set a 3:59.6, and Viper sets a 3:54.7, and Don Siegel right now sets a 3:56.7, and then Kawajova 3:58.1. As we look back and we see Danker with a 4:04.688, and then we look further back to Muller, the South African driver, who wasn't able to make the initial part of qualifying, going provisional P2 of a 3:56.0, and then we can see that Tom 79 has come across with a 4:02.5, Calypso have a 4:17.7, and Belkin were 4:01.274. So Belkin, as you were saying in the pre-race discussion, he wasn't feeling too confident with the overall lap time here, and it's definitely showing the fact he's a little bit off the pace, but he finds himself in the lower portion of the midfield here, so that's not a bad start for the British driver, and you do have to wonder what else he may have up his sleeve when he's got a little bit less fuel in the car now as he goes on to his second flying lap. We do still have some drivers who are completing their current opening laps. For example, we have currently got Netta, who is on one right now, although I think this has been a little bit botched lap in the fact that he is quite a way back, and this is looking to be a lap which is nowhere near the time set by anybody else. So I think this is a warm-up lap, this is a precursor for him to go on to another flying lap, and we're going to stay with the Lexus driver now as he makes his way round, and we'll give you a ride on board with what he's able to do. In fact, we'll stay with the third-person cameras. As you can see, he sets a 4:23.2 there. Now, the one thing that should be considered at this point as well, where do you want to qualify for the purposes of this race? Given the fact we've got a long run down towards turn number 2, as it's effectively known because of the Dunlop chicane, you've got the right-hander before it. Ideally, you want to be on the front 2 rows if you want to have a good position going into the Dunlop chicane, because the thing is you get a massive concertina effect down into the Dunlop chicane, with all the drivers having that standing start, building up that throttle, and then charging all the way down, but at the same time, it's one of those situations whereby the driver at the front of the pack will have a lot more speed compared to the driver at the rear of the pack, and as a result of that, it causes all the drivers to condense into that braking zone. The drivers at the back have to be aware of the fact the drivers at the front will not be going as fast, but they should brake later, whereas the drivers behind have to brake earlier. But we can see Netta right now having a very good opening sector, a 10th up on his previous best, and not a 10th, a 2nd up on his previous best. And the question that I do have to wonder right now is whether Netta made a major mistake on his opening lap, given the fact that he is the best part of 5.5 seconds down on Devlin Calypso, and we did see a number of drivers trip over one another over the course of their opening flying laps, and none more so than, we should point out, SDM Viper, and as a result of that, it could be the case that lap time was lost. I think Viper may have lost up to a second in the final corner, and as a result of that, I think he does have a 3:53 on the table, and he is the best of everybody so far by a quite sizable margin, it should be pointed out, as we see Netabas now making his way down towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes. Now, as he's making his way down, we're going to take a very quick look at the live time screens for you, and what you can see really is that in terms of the lap times, the driver who has been the overall strongest is Viper, but the driver set in purple sectors left, right and centre has been THG's Muller, and you can note that by the fact he's holding 2 purple sectors to his name right there, and we are looking at some very feisty times, albeit Viper is the best part of 1.3 seconds ahead of everybody as it currently stands. As we come back to the live screens right now, we come back to seeing Neto as he's making his way down towards the Mulsanne corner right now, and you can see that Lexus feeling quite strong down here, and of course our drivers had the opportunity to tune the car in between in between races, so it's not as though they had parc ferme conditions between the previous race and now. They've been able to play around with the tune, and I think Netta last time out was just caught out a little bit by the overall handling of the Lexus once it had a bit of tyre wear in it. It was a very strong car to begin with, and he could be very aggressive on his defence with it, but once that tyre life had started to head beyond the cliff, that was where the car became very difficult to drive. It still had a huge amount of bolt out of corners going down to straights, but it really struggled through the corners. Now, as he makes his way down towards Indianapolis for the second time on a flying lap, we've got all of our drivers coming across the line once again to complete their flying laps. We'll let you know if anybody has improved, but I don't think anybody's improved so far, as we do have right now Muller about to make his way across the line. But Netta getting it wrong again through Indianapolis there, and that is a disaster for Netta as we take a look back at what happened there. So you're going to see as we ride on board with Netta, he's going to just simply carry a little bit too much momentum into Indianapolis. Watch his throttle pedal in particular here. You'll notice he's not going as wide as he could going into the corner. As he goes in, he just takes too much of a straight line, and the car just does not stop in time. I think he just needed to lift a little bit more there, but fortunately for him, whilst he's got that heavy damage now, he'll be starting at the back and they'll be able to get it repaired before the start of the race. Now, I don't think you're going to be seeing him improve much more, as Viper has not improved so far. Muller has improved to a 355.7, and then we can see that Don Siegel has not improved either, but another driver who has is THG's Tom79, improving to a 357.3, now putting him half a second off of provisional P3 as it currently stands, albeit now those tyres are starting to look a little bit worn as everybody starts to go onto their final flying lap, and that means that it's going to be a case of the lap time now is going to come more for you from the fuel being burnt out and being able to manage the fact the tyres are going to be a little bit past their prime, albeit in a very good situation, as we can see that Kawajo right now in the BMW M6, the highest M6 driver of all of our drivers, currently sat on that 358.1, and we look forward to seeing what he is able to do come going into the race, given the fact I think this is probably going to be the highest that Kawajo is able to achieve. We're not seeing too much more improvement from the Belgian driver as he's making his way down towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes, but we saw that again last time out at Bathurst with the BMW M6s. They seem to be in the midfield for qualifying, but in the race that's where they started to have a little bit more life in them, and none more so than Kawajo, who did a very good job, and we're hoping that he can repeat that again. Dan Kurt behind him meanwhile in the Mercedes AMG, the American driver here, well, we're not having a bad time, and he's only 7/10 of a Kawajo and 7/10 ahead of Enrico, and we can see that Muller right now behind Dan Kurt, and I think Muller's going to try and use a little bit of slipstream as we see Dan Kurt is almost a 10th up on his previous best, but Muller will be flying right now with the fact he's got that toe, and in that DBR9 he's going to be absolutely charging down the straights as we see upshifts at 159 miles an hour there, opening up that 6th gear, which he can tune down. Of course, the standard tune would see it being one of the longest gears in the game. Now he's got it a lot shorter, now give him a lot of acceleration in 6th gear, coming down into the Mulsanne corner here, and he has got the biggest of toe magnets in the form of Dan Kurt, but Dan Kurt immediately pulling over there, as you can see that Muller is benefiting from that toe. He's 3/10 up on his previous best right now, and if he's able to get past Dan Kurt before they get into Indianapolis and do it cleanly, he could be up by the best part of say 6/10 come at the end of this sector, because that slipstream is going to be extremely powerful. But the flip side of the coin, I think it's going to be one of those cases whereby Muller now needs to be prepared to brake earlier, and Dan Kurt will need to be wary not to clip the back of the South African as they make their way into Indianapolis then, and you can see coming down through the gears very nicely there, Muller, no mistakes from the South African, and now making his way down to Arnage. He is the fastest man on circuit now. He is up by 1.5 tenths, and he's only got the second half of the circuit to go in order to see whether he can jump Viper to pole. Of course, Viper right now not improving from what we can see on our timing screens, but the V12 Vantage driver, he's almost matching his previous best. To be fair, he's only 2/1000ths off of it, so the American is flying and trying to find every which way to improve that chance of being on pole. He's got provisional pole by 9/10 of a second right now, but will it be his come the end? We will find out as we see that Muller is still the fastest man of everybody out on circuit, but he's no longer come the end of this sector going midway through the Porsche curves. He's 8/10 up, but not quite enough right now to dethrone Viper. I think it's going to be very close between the pair of them, so as Viper comes out of the final corner, what's it going to be for the American? He improves by a further 9/10. He improves, and that was because he lost all that time, remembering the Ford chicanes, folks, as we saw at the start when he got caught up behind Enrico. So I think at this point, unless Muller can pull an absolute rabbit out of the hat, I do not think the South African's going to be on pole, but it's a 1.8 second gap to close. How much will he close it by? Will he be able to close it completely? He does not. He improves by 1.1 seconds, so he goes up to provisional P2 with a 2.2 second window, and we can see that Don Siegel making his way through right now, as we note that the driver behind Muller was not able to improve. That was Dan Kurt, and now the Austrian making his way out the final corner, going out into the gravel there, and in fact that lifted off the throttle, so Siegel not improving and backing out of it. Enrico does not improve either. All of our drivers are now starting to come to the end of the lap, as we see that Belkin has picked up a penalty, so this will not be an improvement from the British driver. He will be starting P8 at the highest here. We look further around then and we can see that nobody really improving. Kawajo did not improve. I think Devlin Calypso now coming out of the final corner. This is not going to be an improvement from the Belgian. And what about Netta? Well, he is on a lap at the moment, but remember, he has got the damage on the front of the car. So as a result of this, it's going to be the case, I think, from the Belgian, that if he can get this car to improve in terms of lap time, he will be looking at approximately a 4:10 or something in that region. He'll be looking to try and pip Devlin Calypso, but again, with that damage, I think that car is going to be very difficult to drive going through the Porsche curves in particular, because with front right axle damage and also aero damage, he's 10 seconds up on his previous best, so he is trying to compete for P9 right now, but with that aero damage, he is going to feel it so much for these sweepers, because of the fact the car will just not want to turn in, particularly into the left hand, as the car will refuse to turn into those corners. He'll have to force it as he makes his way through the corners then, and now comes down towards the Ford chicanes. It will be the final lap from everybody here coming into that braking zone. He's only got 4 more corners to go. Can he nail it? He goes a little bit deep initially, and that compromises his straight line run, and now going through the final chicane here. Could this be enough to get him into P9? He's going to come across that line, and he picks up a half-second penalty, but it is enough to get him into P9. But pole position goes to SDM Viper with a 3:53.868. Time for the race. So in fact, it is a rolling start, ladies and gents. My apologies for the confusion there. We will be getting underway with a rolling start, and it will be SDM Viper who leads us away from pole. Behind him, THG Muller, who will be looking competitive. So as the rolling start procedure gets underway and the camera pans round, of course, we'll see that some of our drivers will be starting through the Ford chicanes here, but not Viper. He'll have got that all-important starting position, as will have Muller, in the fact that he'll only be a little bit behind. But 3, 2, 1, and it's lights out, and away we go for the first half of round number 3, and Viper immediately getting off to a good start, with Muller having to start slightly off the corner there, and the gap has already opened up to 1.3 seconds. But of course, with everybody else starting behind him, we can see Viper doing a little bit of weaving there to get some heat in the tyres. Already our P3 and back drives have fallen back a little bit as everybody charges up in towards the Dunlop chicane, turn number 2, and immediately we can see how our field has spaced out a little bit, and nobody is close enough to go for a potential move here. But of course, with that gap, our drivers will have the ability to get the heat in their tyres more comfortably. They won't have to worry about the early slipstream down into turns 1 and 2, and instead they can focus on getting those tyre temperatures up and then going hunting and racing as they make their way onto the Mulsanne straight. And none more so than Viper right now, who will want the perfect exit out of Tetra Rouge, and he does so. He gets a very nice exit there, but so does Muller, and now it's a case about who's got the stronger car for the straight lines here. Will it be the V12 Vantage of Viper, or will it be the DBR9 of Muller? Well, they both seem evenly matched so far, but now you can start to see that gap is closing down a little bit, and this is where Muller's activated that 6th gear, and that's where the South African's car will be much stronger. Indeed, with the right tune, that 6th gear is going to be absolutely brutal compared to the straight line speed of the V12 Vantage ahead of him as they go into the braking zone for the first of the chicanes. And we look further back, and we can see that Kawajo getting very close to the back of Tom 79 right now as we jump on board with the Belgian driver here, and we are riding on board with him right now in his cockpit, and you can see chasing after Tom, and look at how he's going to accelerate up through the gears here. Now remember, the M6 twin turbo V8 here, so it takes a lot of time to get into those turbo bands, but once it gets into there, it will start to catch up compared to the V12 6-litre engine of Tom's Aston Martin. But it's now once it gets up into the upper echelon of the gears, that's where it starts to close up. Of course, you can see he is closing a little bit, but Tom has also had a very strong run out of the first of the Mulsanne chicanes as they make their way all the way down to the braking zone once again, and we can see that our race leaders still about the same distance. They were at the background of your camera shot as they're going through the corner, but Joe right now finding himself in a good position and getting good cornering through the Mulsanne chicanes. You can see how Tom is struggling a little bit on the exit, but he does have the slipstream of Don Siegel, which is going to give him a little bit of a comfort barrier versus the Belgian behind him. As we look further back right now, and we can see Enrico Playbourse, the Dutch driver, having a good run so far, albeit 2 seconds down on Dankert, but also 1.1 seconds up on Belkin. As we look back to the front of the pattern, we see that Tom and Siegel getting a little bit closer comfort there, and I think there might have been a small amount of contact between the two drivers, but nothing too serious. Nobody's picked up any damage there, and Tom just getting a little bit too close to the Austrian. I think he'll be wary of that, and I think Don will be thinking that he's got a little bit of pressure right now, and Tom trying to get the early game on here. And I think what Tom's feeling right now is that he's got a very fast fellow countryman behind him, as we see our race leaders battling. It should be pointed out, Viper versus Muller here, and Viper has dropped back behind Muller already. Muller really using the acceleration of that Aston Martin to his advantage, and he's up into P1. But will Viper find his way back? He's picked up a half-second penalty for cutting the apex at the Indianapolis entry point there, and that half-second penalty, he'll have to burn that, of course, and he's not permitted to overtake with a penalty, so he needs to hold on to that position right now and find a creative way of getting rid of that penalty. He burns it immediately on the straight here and drops back into the slipstream of Viper, and I think that's a smart move from Muller in the fact that he's going to play to his advantage the fact that he can use the American in front of him to keep him in the race. Now, of course, behind, we can see that Tom has got past Siegel. Now, that happened in the run down towards Arnage, and we're going to take a look back at how that all played out. We've had that happen going into Indianapolis. My apologies, folks. We did catch that a little bit off camera there, and that means Tom is up into P3 right now. He's got Don Siegel all the way behind him as they're making their way all the way round through the Porsche curves now, and you can see in the rear of your camera you've got Carajo, who is chasing after these two, albeit the difficulty will be for Carajo that he's got to try and find his way into this fight, but wary of the fact that these Aston Martins will be that little bit stronger in the acceleration zones initially until he can get that turbo laid down, and that's the thing that will be on his mind as we see our race leaders just making their way through the Ford chicanes now, and behind them Don Siegel looking very, very aggressive there versus Tom, but not able to make it count. So after lap number 1, it is SDM Viper leading by 1 second ahead of THG's Muller. Next, THG Tom 79 in P3, followed by Don Siegel in P4. These two already exchanging one place, and then it's Carajo in P5. That's our top 5. And then we've got a 2.6 second gap down to P6, as held on to by Dan Kurt 77 right now. And then we've got Enrico Playborst in P7. Belkin catching up to him very gradually right now, following after him up towards turn number 1. And you can see that Belkin having a very gradual race right now, not really pushing too hard. I think trying to make the car go as long as possible. Netta in P9, where he started, and then Devlin Calypso in P10. The two back runners here not able to keep up with the front runners right now or the midfield, but you never know where they could factor in later on in the race. And of course, we've only done 1 lap. We're expecting a lot more laps before we get this race to its conclusion, or at least the first half of the race to conclusion. But we can see that Muller right now falling back a little bit off of Viper there, and then behind, well, you've got a fight kicking off here in the fact Tom, Don Siegel and Carajo all within the best part of half a second, if not less, from one another, and Tom right now is at the front of this train and giving slipstream to the drivers, and Carajo in particular is getting a double toe here, and you do have to wonder whether Carajo is going to try and go for something come the run down to Mulsanne corner, or whether he'll simply wait and be patient, let the two drivers ahead of him fight too hard. But note that Tom, with the 6th gear of that DBR9, is able to hold on at the top end of the straight, and Carajo is just able to keep up with them thanks to the slipstream right now. And I think that's the one thing that he'll be grateful for, is the fact that he's got that double toe, and so he's not falling away whatsoever. But Tom are doing a very strong job right now. As you can see, they're all making their way down towards the 2nd chicane, and Joe is just sat there. You can just see he's not gaining anything here, but of course he could also be short shifting to do a little bit of fuel saving early on in the race, because remember, the fuel consumption in this race is only ×1, which means the fuel comes down very gradually. And so every little bit of fuel saved here is going to be very beneficial and probably give the driver an extra lap at least as they all make their way through the 2nd chicane then. And you can see that Don not having the best of runs there, and now Carajo's just tapping the back of him very slightly as if to give him a little bit of a boost there to say, come on Don, I know you can get back in that fight. I'm not going to be the one to fight you. I haven't got the engine power to do it right now. I'll have it a little bit later on, but not right now. And Tom, I think, will not want to see those two working together. And in fact, Carajo now going for the move. He's going to go on the inside into the Mulsanne corner here. It's Joe on the left, it's Don Siegel on the right, and it flips around the camera as we see Carajo on the inside here versus Siegel, and they're side by side going through the Mulsanne corner, and they both give each other enough space, but Carajo just not able to get it done, and Siegel holds on to the position there as they make their way down towards Indianapolis now. But this is opening the gap for Tom, who's now got a 1.2 second gap over Don Siegel, and this is exactly what he would have wanted, because this gives him the opportunity to break away and start making a play for P3, as Don Siegel now has to defend for P4, and Joe will be probably thinking right now, darn it, I couldn't have made that, mate. I couldn't have got that any worse than the fact that I've been able to let the P3 driver get away, and we've lost the slip to him now, so we're now battling for P4 for the time being. But of course, strategy is an element as well, but I think Joe will be thinking that he wants Don to now catch up to the P3 driver of Tom 79. As we look back up in front, and we can see that Muller and Viper in the interim, they're just pulling a little bit away from the rest of the field right now, but the gap is 1.3 seconds. It's closing a little bit, as I think, hold on a second, what has happened here to Don Siegel? He's gone into the wall at Arnage. It's the first victor to be claimed by that corner. As Enrico's got a penalty, he's currently burning, and Don has picked up damage on the front axle, the front left axle, and also on the front aero, the front bumper in particular. We will take a look back at what happened there, but we'll wait to see if Enrico's able to find his way past, as we also see that Belkin there, the rear view camera shot, was burning a small penalty in the run up towards the Porsche curves, but Enrico up into P6. Now what happened to Don? So we're riding on board with Don right now, and you can see he's coming out of Indianapolis absolutely fine. He will have Karajo behind him. Was there contact at all in braking into Arnage? No, he just goes a bit deep, and he goes way too deep, in fact, and hits the wall there, and then spins it as he gets on the power. So just a little bit too much power as he was coming out of the corner for Don, and that's what cost him the overall control of the car and put it into the wall. That's very unfortunate there. Don feeling a bit of pressure, and he immediately jumps into the pits. Now the question will be, will he change his strategy, or is this just simply a repair job for Don? That'll be the big question. As you can see, they're bringing out the tyres here. I think it may be a tyre change, and he'll be looking to repair and go on to an opposite strategy. He may go for a pit stop now, which may take him much closer to the end than he originally anticipated, but we'll wait and find out. As we can see that Muller has picked up a 1 second penalty for track limits at the Dunlop chicane, we're hearing in our ear right now, and now Tom is going to chase after him. He's 8.3 seconds down, and he's 1.3 seconds ahead of Karajo. But do keep in mind the BMW driver, note how he is really closing down the gap through the opening 6 corners, and the key thing to note about this BMW is it's been tuned for handling. You can see it through the corners how much he closes up on Tom. In fact, he's just stripped the best part of 1.5 seconds out of Tom through 6 corners, albeit Tom's not going to care too much about that, because watch how he's now pulling away despite the fact Joe has the slipstream here. Tom can just absolutely fly down the straights, but the Belgian, well, the second of the 2 Belgians, Joe here, what Tom also being a fellow countryman of Joe, you can imagine that Joe will probably be thinking, okay Tom, you have the straights, I have the corners, let's just treat it as even for now and let's not bully one another. But as they make their way through the first Mulsanne chicane, watch how Joe just rips the time out of him, and as soon as they get back on a straight, it's a case of, okay Tom, off you go, do what you got to do in 6th gear, I don't mind. And then they come back to corners once again. And looking further back, Dan Kurt right now in P5, and had a good opening pair of laps. You can see that the Mercedes-AMG driver 4 seconds down on the battle for P4 and closing a little bit on Joe. And again, it's a case, I think this Mercedes-AMG has been tuned for an all-rounded nature, but with a little bit more of a preference on straight line speed rather than handling. And the American are making the most of it as they make their way down towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes. Now looking further back, we can see that Belkin and Enrico have changed places here, and Enrico's looking for a cheeky little move. Will he go for it into the Mulsanne chicane part 2? I do not think he's going to, although he's going to try and keep the door open there, and Belkin respected it. In fact, I think Enrico tried to just simply keep a little bit of the car there to put Belkin off, and it's worked, and Enrico now is all over the back of him, and we'll be looking to go for a move up into the Mulsanne corner. Now, will Belkin fight it, or will he decide to stick to a more conservative strategy here and just simply let Enrico pass? Well, Enrico just does not have enough of a toe down the straight right now to jump him as they make their way down towards the Mulsanne corner. If Enrico's going to do it, he's going to have to do it soon, because I know Belkin's just going to shut that door, and indeed he does. He shuts the door nice and early going down to the Mulsanne corner, goes a little bit deep for it, but Enrico backs out of it. So I think these two are trying to use one another right now just to get a little bit of slipstream and do a bit of fuel saving as well. And then you've got Netta right now, who's 10 seconds off that battle for P6 in the Lexus in P8, and you can see making his way down towards Indianapolis right now and building up that speed. He's got Devlin Calypso in P9, and remember Don Siegel, who had to pit, well, we'll just let you know that he did decide to change tyres. He's gone to a set of racing mediums, but he didn't put fuel in the car, so he's gone to the medium here. And our drivers, remember, have the option of the medium or the hard, but they don't have to use them. They can use softs all the way through the race if they so desire. But meanwhile, up front, Viper now 3.2 seconds clear of Muller. There's not been too much change other than Muller losing a bit of time because of track limits penalties, but we do know that Muller is keeping that gap nice and steady when he's not succumbing to penalties, and I think Muller, as a result of that, will be looking to find his way back into the race a little bit later on. Meanwhile, Tom versus Joe. Well, Joe, I think, has got it wrong somewhere because he has lost quite a bit of time. He's now 2.5 seconds down on Tom, and I think there might have been a mistake going into Indianapolis. He just doesn't have the confidence that Tom does on braking into Indianapolis. But that gap coming down like wildfire once again as soon as they go through the Porsche curves. That gap being ripped down by a whole second by Joe as they make their way out of that sequence. Again, it's great to see the contrast between these two cars and how the BMW versus Aston Martin DBR9 matchup is proving so close in terms of both cars have their strengths and weaknesses and their polar opposites in terms of one being made for speed, one being made for handling, and you do have to wonder how it's going to play out between the pair of them come the end of the race, albeit we've still got the best part of 1 hour and 47 minutes to go, so it's going to be a long way until we get to that point, as Dankert, I believe, was just burning a small penalty there and also trying to get a bit more heat in his tyres. In fact, I think Dankert's having a bit of a difficult time here with getting the tyre temps up, and as a result of that, just a little bit of weaving there on the straight once again. He's got a sizable gap. He's got 13.5 seconds to Belkin, so nobody's going to report him for weaving on the straight there because he's not being dangerous to anyone, but I think it's just the case that he just doesn't feel as though those tyres are warm enough or in the zone, as we see Belkin in P6 right now, still got Enrico all over the back of him, and I think at this point Enrico's got to think about, well, okay, if I'm going to stay behind Belkin, I'm going to do this, I really need to do a lot of fuel saving here to make it worth my while, or I've got to jump him and start pulling away, because if he's going to be behind him this close and he starts to have to overdrive the car, particularly heavy braking when he gets too close to the back of Belkin, that's going to start putting extra tyre wear in, as well as the dirty air going through these sweeping corners, and that's going to take the tyre life out of Enrico before he's even been able to get the tyres to do the stint he wants them to do. So it's all food for thought for Enrico right now, as the Dutchman continues to make his way around, falling back to about 1.1 seconds off of Belkin, having a bit of a difficult run there through Tetra Rouge, but again, not too far out of reach to get back into Belkin's slipstream in due course. As we see Netta right now, just making his way out of Tetra Rouge as well. The field opening up a little bit here, and we do look further back, and we can see that Devlin Calypso here having a bit of difficulty through Tetra Rouge, and he has got Siegel all behind him, and Siegel sweeps past him here, and I think Devlin wasn't going to fight that one, but instead just decided to back off of it and jump into the toe of the Austrian. And in fact, as they now make their way down towards the first of the Mulsanne chicanes, you can see how Devlin is now starting to equate his speed to that of Siegel as they make their way down here. And again, using him as a tow device, probably expecting the Austrian to run away come the exit of the two chicanes and then down towards the Mulsanne corner. And as they make their way down into the braking zone, then you'll see that he's just pulling it out of the dirty air a little bit, does Calypso, in order to just give himself a better, more consistent braking line. And now coming out of the chicane, you'll see that Devlin has broken away as Enrico and Belkin change places here, and Enrico goes to the move and Belkin goes a little bit deep there, but Enrico has got the move down. In fact, Belkin's sliding quite a bit. I think he's got the car back under control, just running out into the marbles a little bit there, but let's take a look back at what happened. So we're right on board with Enrico. He's going to go for the move around into the inside here as they come into that braking zone. As we switch to the external camera, you see Belkin goes out into the dirt with his right-hand tyres. In fact, that caused the car to slide a little bit wide there, and that's why Belkin just had a little bit of snap oversteer on the exit of the second chicane, because he picked up the dirt on his tyres and he just didn't have the grip when he tried to deploy the power. But a move from Enrico, we expected it was going to come, and it's happened now, and that's the case. Can Enrico break away from Belkin, or will Belkin be chasing him hard and fast instead? But we look back up front and we can see that Viper now 4.3 seconds ahead of Muller, the American, pulling away a little bit. It seems to be approximately a second or so a lap compared to Muller is the gap that he's starting to pull. And perhaps it's the case that Muller's just started to feel the car not perhaps playing to his strengths over the course of the second half of this opening stint. Well, the second portion of this opening stint, so I'm not sure it's going to be half. I think it might be a quarter, if anything. We are 15 minutes in, of course, now. And we do know that Muller is perhaps just falling a little bit off. Let's take a look at those tyres for you. Let's look at the telemetry side drives. We can see our race leader starting to get a little bit of graining on the left-hand tyres, particularly that rear left from the power deployment through the wheels. Front engine rear-wheel drive, of course, but on 75% fuel. And we can see that Muller picking up another half-second penalty for track limits coming out of the Porsche curves there. We know that his tyres are in a better situation by comparison, and his fuel's about the same, but he's just having a very difficult time of keeping it away from the track limit penalties. And perhaps that's what's making the difference right now between the South African and the American. Our P3 driver of Tom on a little bit more fuel than the leaders in front, but he's got a little bit more wear on the front right tyre in particular, which, given the fact that this circuit is clockwise, that makes a little bit of a nonsense, given the fact I'd expect it to be on the left-hand tyre. We've got more right-hand turns than left-hand turns, but still, if anybody's going to find a weird way to get the tyre wear to shape up on the car, I guess it's going to be Tom 79 in this instance, but he's doing a solid job there. And then we've got Kawajo just behind him in a similar situation, with a good spread of tyre wear across all four tyres. The rear right, however, not having done much work at all by the looks of things to the Belgian, and his fuel consumption about the same as his opponent in P3. Then we've got our P5 driver of Dankert 77, the American, making his way through the Dunlop chicane right now. And we can see the front left being loaded quite heavily there in that Mercedes AMG, quite heavy on the braking zones and using a bit more fuel compared to the race leaders, our top four in particular. He's just 1% or 2 down. And then we have got Enrico, who has been doing quite a bit of fuel saving, it should be noted. In fact, he's got the best fuel of anyone at the moment, and the tyres are not looking too bad either. And I'd say that was a good amount of fuel saving behind Belkin, who has used a similar amount of fuel, in fact, but has taken more life out of his tyres, running quite an aggressive aggressive tyre setup there for Belkin. That's taken some life, particularly out the front tyres, as he slides his way there through the second of the chicanes in the opening sector. And I think Belkin now starting to just feel the tyre wear creeping in and needs to consider backing the car off a little bit, or might be looking at a very early pit stop, given the fact that those tyres are looking a little bit worse to wear and that car's looking a little bit unsettled. Our P8 driver of Netta, tyres in good condition, but he's used up quite a bit of fuel, as Don Siegel's now going to try and carve his way through. And remember our Austrian, of course, Don Siegel, who made that mistake at Arnage on lap number 4, put it into the wall, of course, dropping all the way down to last place, and he went into the pits to repair. Well, he's gone to a set of racing mediums. He's in the slipstream of Netta, and he's going to make that a simple pass there. I'm not sure if the RCF's going to have the straight line speed and the time to get back. It will be in the slipstream, of course. Will he come back at Don Siegel? I think if Netta does, he's going to be costing himself time doing this. In fact, he is going to come back at him, so he does want to fight for this. So he's not going to let the Austrian have it all his own way here as they break down into the first of the chicanes. And Don Siegel in return now tries to get out of the dirty air there into the braking zone, but he's not able to find a way on the inside. So Netta, remember at Bathurst, the one driver who's the latest on the brakes of everybody was Netta, and he's doing it again in that Lexus RCF, and he's going to make it work. So I think Netta right now is just looking to try and be a nuisance to Don. He'll want to try and hold Don up, of course, because Don right now on those racing mediums, it could be argued, could go extremely deep into the race. And as a result of that, as they're side by side coming down into the second chicane, Don on the inside, Netta on the outside. I think Don here, he's going to try and outbrake the Belgian, but the Belgian goes on the brakes later than Don, and you could see just how much confidence Netta has in the brakes, that RCF. He can just outbrake Don every time. And it's even by the smallest of margins, but every yard he can outbrake him by is more than enough to keep him ahead. And now Don's got to try and find a way into Mulsanne corner here, but is that going to work? Of course, given the fact they've got the long run down towards Indianapolis. If I was Don, what I'd think about doing is holding off through the Mulsanne corner and then going for a huge send around Netta going into Indianapolis, or at least getting the long run down, because by the end of that straight, that Aston Martin will have the straight line speed advantage once it deploys its engine power up in fifth gear in particular. But of course, that Lexus RCF, Netta has tuned it for straight line speed. We know that, tuned it for straight line speed and braking. And look already as they come out onto the straight here, you can see how Don is so far back. Initially he was half a second back, and now he's starting to close. But they've already come through the first kink, and now he's within 2.5 temps range, and now he can look at making the move. They've gone through the second kink, so Don's got to do it really late now. But the thing is that Netta's defending is the inside as they go into the braking zone for Indianapolis, and he has to back out of it simply because Netta's got so much speed, although he's gone very deep as Netta, and Don goes past him for a cutback there, and that was a very well timed positioning from Don, and that was very close to tears for Netta there. We saw him make that mistake in qualifying and put it into the wall, but Netta this time keeping it controlled, but it's a little bit sideways out of Arnage, but Don finally getting himself up into P8 and now pressing onwards and upwards. But he won't be happy that he's lost himself the best part of a couple of seconds on this lap battling with Netta, and he wouldn't have wanted that, as we see that Devlin Calypso right now down in P10 in a little bit of a world of his own right now, but you never know, he could factor into this race a little bit later on. But we look back up front, and I can tell you that your race leader, 4.9 seconds clear, is SDM Viper ahead of Muller right now with 20 minutes passing, running a little bit wide there at the second chicane, in fact. And I think he's going to be wary of the fact that he's got some dirt there, which he won't want to get on the tyres, as we see that Muller, by comparison, at 5 seconds down the road, starting to calm it down, I think, right now. I think Muller is going to be starting to think to himself, right, if I keep picking up time penalties, then I'll just be taking myself out of the race against Viper, and there's no chance I can come back. I need to calm it down. I know I'm faster on the straights. I'll use that to my advantage. If I'm slower through the corners, okay, I'm slower through the corners. But the thing that also Muller may be thinking about right now, okay, if I'm faster on the straights, can I fuel save on the straights as well? Can I perhaps just find a way of just getting 1% fuel back over the course of every 2 laps? And that could mount up to something come the pit stops. So that's the thing I think the South Africans really got to think about right now. What could he do to throw a spanner in the works of Viper? And we look behind and we see that Tom being closed up a little bit by Kawajo right now. But remember, we do have this back and forth situation, straights versus corners, Aston Martin versus BMW, as Tom goes a bit wide there out of the first Mulsanne chicane, almost incurring a track limit penalty. The track limits here are a little bit funky, of course, but we can see that Tom keeping it together for the time being and accelerating away from Kawajo. But these two really close in terms of lap times. To give you an idea, on the previous lap, Tom set a 3:57.8. Kawajo, by comparison, set a 3:57.7. So only a tenth between them. The handling car having the advantage on the previous lap. Will it be the same come the end of this lap? Well, that will be the big question everybody will be asking, of course. Indeed, will be continued to ask probably for the entirety of the rest of the race. But these two, I think we're going to be expecting some sparks between them come the end of this race, or at least in the second half of the 2 hours. As we know that Dankert right now, 10.5 seconds back on the battle for P3. And I think really just concentrating on bringing this car home in P5 right now as it currently stands until we get to the strategy point. Because if you can keep it consistent for the time being, then you'll definitely secure himself the P5 position, depending on his strategy. But then it all comes down to, of course, how does he fit into the wider strategies of everybody around him. Now we can see Enrico Playboys, by comparison, having cleared Belkin, overtaking him, of course, back on lap number 4. We know that he is now 5.2 seconds clear of Belkin, so definitely Enrico had the pace to be unleashed, and he was, in his opinion, being held up by Belkin. As we look back at Belkin, and we can see that the British driver right now falling back a little bit and making his way down towards the Mulsanne corner here, and I think he'll be looking to find a bit of magic in the strategy element, as he was saying to me earlier. But we will wait and see, of course, as he makes his way into the braking zone for turn number, well, in fact, screw the numbers, but they're going down into the Mulsanne corner as he makes his way through, coming out there nice and cleanly. He's coming out of the corner right now, and we can see that really not able to catch back up to Enrico, just keeping that gap as stable as possible, but Enrico definitely just eking it out very gradually as things go on. As we look further back, we can see that Don Siegel has cleared Netta by the best part of 7.8 seconds over the course of what has been a lap, effectively, now coming up to this point. And that is a huge gap to be opened up by the Austrian. So Netta definitely doing everything he could to try and hold up Don. But in the end, it was the case that it was just going to be a brief defence and not one that was going to last forever. And Devlin, 16.1 seconds off of P9 right now. All the way down in P10 is the Aston Martin V12 Vantage driver, as he makes his way down towards Indianapolis right now. So we're looking back up front again. We can see that gap is stabilising a little bit between Viper and Muller. Viper currently holds the fastest lap at 3:54.3, and we see that his previous lap was at 3:55.0, whereas Muller's was a 3:55.2. So the two drivers pretty much even in terms of lap times right now. And I think Muller perhaps has just got his head down a little bit and realised, you know what, now's the time to start getting into the game a bit more. We're getting into that second phase of the tyre life, and we need to get it settled down. And what I mean by second phase, ladies and gentlemen, once the drivers take off about 10 to 15% of the overall grip of the tyre, once they take the life down by about that 15%, the tyre starts to evolve a little bit, and that's where the drivers have to start adjusting their racing lines. They have to be a bit more sensitive. For example, at Tetra Rouge there, you can see that Muller started to run a little bit wider on the corner apex there, and as a result of that, he had to back out of it on the exit, otherwise he would have gone beyond the exit curb and picked up a penalty. But you'll note that our drivers now having to start to adapt to the way the car wants to behave, and it's the same with Tom and Kawajo, and I think in particular the one driver now who will be experiencing a deficit will be Tom, in the fact that he has the straight line speed, we know that, but as tyre evolution kicks in and we've got more rubber down the circuit, he'll start to lose what handling he does have going through the handling sectors, particularly the Porsche curves and also through Indianapolis and Arnage, and that's where Tom will now start to become a little bit more vulnerable to Kawajo. And you can see that gap, it's no longer breaking open to more than say 2.5 seconds over the course of the straight, and that's what Joe will be hoping for. He'll be hoping that gap, the overall delta of the gap, starts to swing in his favour rather than swinging in Tom's favour over the course of a lap. And as a result of that, then we could expect that Kawajo might find himself in the slipstream going through some of the sweeper corners, and now give him the opportunity to close up just that little bit more. Now looking further back, we can see that Dankert has managed to get a good 17.8 seconds over Enrico. And in fact, Enrico, I think it's dropped off a little bit over the last lap. I think that might have been a small mistake, because that gap has opened up quite sizably by the best part of about 3 to 4 seconds over lap number 6. But Enrico fighting on all the same as he makes his way out of the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. Now in terms of how can we expect things to play out, well, given the fact, if we look at the telemetry once again as Viper goes a little bit sideways there on the exit of the Mulsanne corner, given the fact that our drivers are now starting to hit approximately the 15 to 20% tyre wear mark on some of their tyres, or they're starting to move into that phase, and the fact we are what is 26 minutes into this 2-hour race, I think if drivers are planning to do a one-stop, obviously they'll need to pit at the hour mark. I think that's going to be quite a tall order for some drivers. Now, what may be the case is that some drivers decide, you know what, after 15 minutes, after 15 further minutes, so 45 minutes, it's the case that the soft tyre has gone beyond the lifespan, but I've still got a ton of fuel. Perhaps they might switch to the medium and decide to fuel the car and essentially go to the end on the medium, which would just have a bit more durability. That could be one approach that the drivers could use, because if the soft has a life of, say, 45 minutes, then we'd expect that the medium would approximately have a life of about in the region of about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. Now, that won't get them all the way to the end unless they go to the full hour and 15 minutes, but if they can stretch it that far, it might be a good idea. So I think we'll either see some drivers try and take the soft for the full hour, or some drivers might pit early and go into a slightly more durable compound such as the medium, which Don Siegel's done, of course. And to give you an idea how the Austrian's doing, look at his tyre life. Now, those tyres, of course, are only 4.5 laps old right now, if our memory serves us well, or 3.5 laps old. So as a result, this isn't a true comparison, but you can see how they're taking a little bit more time to wear in, and that can give the Austrian a bit of an advantage here in terms of the strategy race, because whilst he is expected to be slower lap on lap compared to an equal driver who's on the racing soft, his tyres will not fall off the cliff as rapidly because they'll have that longer tyre life. So that'll be the big question that hangs over Don Siegel. Indeed, the number of drivers will be wondering, what is he going to do now that he's on the medium? And our front runners, when will they decide to pit? Will they try and go for that one stop, or will they make it a more predictable but perhaps safer two-stop? But the problem with the two-stop, of course, is because the pit time loss here is so long. You're looking at the best part of 25 seconds just for a tyre change here at Le Mans. As a result of that, that's where the two-stop can really ruin a driver's race, because of the fact that they've then got to make up 25 seconds on a fresher set of tyres, which don't say it's not possible, but you've got to make up that time by pushing hard. But then you've also got to pass the guy who's on the one stop, who, if he drives defensively enough and he uses slipstream to his advantage, he can prove to be a nuisance later in the race. Now, what I can tell you is that Kawajou is starting to fall back just a little bit off of Tom. He is starting to see the drop-off. Now, on the previous lap, it was a 3:58.0 from Zhou versus Tom's what was a 3:58.2. Now, it's actually worth noting that Tom was the slightly slower driver there, but perhaps going onto this lap, that's where it's opened up. But you can see how that gap is opening up just a little bit more in Tom's favour right now as they make their way through Tetra Rouge once again. Of course, Kawajou's going to initially close up here. In fact, he's closed up quite a bit there. I think Tom might have had to lift quite heavily there through Tetra Rouge, and Zhou has had a really good run out of there, because that gap has come down really dramatically. Normally it come down to about 1.8 seconds and then open up, but this time it's come down to 1.3, and it's going to open back up to 1.8 come the braking zone into the first Mulsanne chicane. But Zhou is starting to get the closest he's ever been come the run from Tetra Rouge down to the first chicane down Mulsanne here. And I think for the BMW driver, this could be a key opportunity. If he can build a little bit more pressure on Tom, he might find himself within striking distance come 2 laps time, because this gap is really swinging out in the favour of Kawajou as we get to the end of this first half an hour mark. And really, it's been the case that the closest battle out on circuit right now for track position is Tom versus Zhou in the battle for P3. We're going to take a brief water break, of course. We're just going to go silent for a moment, and then we'll give you a recap of the first half an hour and what to expect in the second half an hour. So with the first half an hour effectively completed in this race, well, in the best part of 10 seconds, what has the story been so far, for those who haven't tuned in until now? Well, having started on pole, SDM Viper, the American driver, he qualified on pole by the region of what was a second in the end, with a very strong qualifying lap. We can see that he has broken away with a 5.3 second gap over THG Muller, the South African in the rear of your camera shot right now. But it hasn't been the case that Viper has had this all his own way. Muller was looking very strong on the opening couple of laps and in fact took the fight to Viper, but a combination of some track limit penalties and minor mistakes by Muller, the man you're seeing in P2 right now, has meant that Viper has been able to make a break, and Muller has had to change tact. He's gone for a more consistent approach now. In fact, he's not working on closing that gap down. He's let it grow a little bit, but not too much. He's letting it grow at most by about 2 to 3 tenths a lap. But as we're going deeper and deeper into this first stint, as we now move into the second phase of tyre life, which we've just been talking about, it's been a case that Muller's now started to stabilise that gap, and he's just caused it to creep down a tiny bit every so often. Of course, it's Aston Martin V12 Vantage in the case of Viper versus DBR9 GT1 in the case of Muller, and the two cars look very evenly matched right now, as then we've got an 18.6 second gap all the way down to Tom 79 in P3 in the Aston Martin DBR9, having started in what was P P4 if our memory serves as well. It was Don Siegel who was ahead of him, but Don having a mistake out of Arnage on lap 3. As a result, and putting it into the wall meant that Tom's crept up into this position, and he's now there 3.2 seconds ahead of Kawajo. Kawajo behind him in the BMW M6. These two have been trading lap times. And the greatest discovery between these two is the fact that the BMW M6 of Kawajo, which you're looking at right now, is made for handling, whereas the Belgian the Aston Martin of the Belgian Tom ahead of him, both of them being Belgian, of course, both of the same country. The Aston Martin is made for straight line speed. So Kawajo has been closing up through the corners, but as soon as they get onto the straights, it's been a case that Tom has been able to pull away and open up some very sizable gaps. But what we're starting to notice is that with the tyre wear coming in, if Tom makes any mistakes going through the sweeper corners, Kawajo is able to close up immensely, particularly from Tetrarouge down towards the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. As you can see, the gap between them as they go on to lap number 9 is only 1.8 seconds. It's going to open up, of course, until they get to the braking zone for the first Dunlop chicane, but the return point is that Kawajo is starting to see the delta of that gap swing in his favour. You've then got a 17-second gap to THG Danker 77, the American driver here, making his way around in P5 right now, our top AMG Mercedes driver, having had a very quiet race, given the fact he had a good start, and it's really just been a quiet one. He's found himself in no man's land, got the promotion up to P5 from P6 thanks to Don Siegel making that mistake, and really just has had a very comfortable one. And he's got a 20.6 second gap over Enrico Playbos. The Dutchman have found his way past Belkin in a very close-knit battle. Belkin at the rear of your picture right now as they make their way across the timing line onto lap number 9. The Dutchman now 7.8 seconds clear of the Brit behind him and looking to pull that gap open as much as possible. He's been creeping it open, albeit it has stabilised as of lap number 8. Belkin in P7 right now, looking for a more strategic way to get into this race and having to save the car a number of times as the car has crept away from him a little bit, and it does so a tiny bit there. Going through the Dunlop chicane, you saw he just ran out into the marbles a little bit come the first of the two corners, but he's doing a very good job of adapting to the tyre wear now that he's had those very slight catches, and as a result of that he is pushing after Enrico, but the gap is opening up. In fact, it's opened up to 8.4 seconds now, as behind him he has got the recovering driver of Don Siegel, who after that mistake went into the pits, repaired the car and put on a set of racing mediums, and we're wondering what the Austrian is looking to achieve with those mediums, whether he's going to try and go all the distance on that single set of tyres, but I don't think he'll have the fuel to do it, to be honest, given the fact we've still got an hour and 25 minutes and he's down to just under half a tank. Netabas in P9 right now, picking up a 1 second penalty for track limits there at turn number 3 from what we're hearing. And the Lexus RCF driver, having made his way up into P9 past Devlin Calypso, he's then just had a very quiet one. He's battled a little bit with Don Siegel, who was trying to come through the field, but really it hasn't been a good start for this race for him, and it's been a difficult one, and we look forward to seeing what he's able to do later on as he runs a little bit wide off Tetrarouge there. I think that might be another track limit penalty to compound the 1 second he's already got, although we will wait and see. It's not extended, so he was just within track limits there. And Devlin Calypso here, well, before we can even look at him, the commentator's curse applies, and in fact spinning out of what is turn number 5 there, and let's take a look at what's happened to the Belgian driver. So we're going to see he comes out of the Dunlop chicane here, and as he makes his way over the brow of the hill, we're going to jump on board, and I think what you're going to see as he makes his way down through the right-hander here of 4, he's going to come heavy on the brakes. Does he go a bit deep? He goes too deep on the brakes, and as a result the car just simply lifts onto the gravel, and well, there it goes, and he managed to catch it nicely in terms of making sure it didn't beach itself in the gravel, but he'll be a little bit irritated with himself for that one, and grateful he didn't pack up any damage to the car. But that will have put some extra wear in the tyres, and he won't have wanted that, of course, as he now continues on his merry way. And as they make their way all the way down towards the Mulsanne chicane here, you can see the dirt on his tyres just catching out a little bit under the braking zone. He'll need the best part of half a lap in order to burn those off as he now makes his way around towards the second third of the straight. But looking back to our race leader right now, it's looking comfortable for Viper, who is still leading, and that gap has opened up to 6.1 seconds. He does definitely seem to be enjoying the fact he's up the front, he's got clear track in front of him, and he's just able to run with this one. But our battle for P3, Kawajo definitely started to fall back a little bit, and I think the pendulum has now swung in the favour of Tom. Although I say that once again, as soon as they come through these Porsche coasts, you can see just how much that gap closes, but this time it doesn't seem to be closing as rapidly as it was in the previous laps, and I do think that perhaps Kawajo is starting to hit the cliff in terms of the tyre performance by comparison with Tom here. As we look at their telemetries, you can see that Tom, having loaded the tyre wear onto the front tyres, you'd expect he's experiencing a bit more understeer with that car, but then if we look at Kawajo, you can see that the fronts are also starting to experience a bit more wear than the rears, and that means he'll be getting some net understeer through the sweepers. And I think that's what's costing Joe the ability to chase down Tom at this point, is the fact that he's just got too much tyre wear on the front, so he's getting understeer naturally through the corners where he tries to carry the speed. He needs to try and get that tyre wear distributed across all 4 tyres as evenly as possible in order to be able to get the natural flow he wants through the corners. He'll still close up through the corners, mind you, but it won't be through the sides that we've seen previously unless Tom now starts making major mistakes as they make their way down towards Tetra Rouge once again, and we can see Joe going into the corner, and I think he'll get this one absolutely nailed as he has done previously. Gets a good run out of it, and in fact that gap has come down to 1.4 seconds. It's going to come down to the 1.3 region, but now Tom just starts to open it back up again, and you can see that Tom very wary of the fact that Joe was getting that gap down to 1.3 seconds, but now it's the case that it's starting to creep back up to 1.4, and the journey begins once again for Tom in terms of trying to break away from Joe. Now we can see Don Siegel in P7. He has cleared Belkin. We didn't quite see that on camera, but he has cleared Belkin, and that is now making his way in P7 up towards Enrico, who's a further 9.6 seconds up the road, charging after him, of course, as we see that Belkin starting to experience a little bit of that major cliff with regards to the tyres, particularly the left-hand side tyres, but a good distribution of tyre wear will give him a bit more longevity in this opening stint. I do think he is trying to go for the one stop. I think the majority of the drivers here are going for the one stop because of the fact that really with the long pit time loss here and the fact they don't have to take on as much fuel as they would with a heavier fuel consumption rate, it is the case as we see Belkin going wide out of Tetra Rouge, and that is definitely going to be at least a 1 second penalty as he flicks on the hazards briefly to let the drivers behind know that he's had a runoff. In fact, 2.5 seconds, brutal penalty there is given by our automated steward, but now Belkin making his way down to the first of the Mulsanne chicanes as we see that Devlin Clemenzo coming into the pits from P10, and those tyres definitely at the end, and he is going to go in with 38 minutes completed here, so this is definitely going to be a 2-stop from Devlin unless he is going on to the medium and taking on full fuel to go to the end of the race, which he could do, of course, given the fact he's used up 40 minutes, and that means in the 120 minutes 60% fuel he'd need to do a bit of fuel saving, but he could potentially go to the end as we're waiting for his car to be serviced. Now, it's worth noting that over the course of lap number 10 so far, Viper has been caught up by Muller by the best part of 0.6 of a second. Now, whether there was a mistake from Viper, alternatively, Muller has just had or started to build up some pace and build up the run in terms of he's bringing those tyres to life again and getting them back in the operating zone as Viper has started to struggle a little bit. That's a question to be answered, but I think Muller has been saving some pace over the last few laps. Over the last 5 laps in particular, I think he has been cooling it down a little bit and just deciding to run that car a little bit more safely, do a bit of fuel saving, a bit of time management before unleashing some pace again. And given the fact they've only got 20 minutes before that first hour mark is complete, and I think that's when we'll expect them to pit. I think now Muller is going on the charge here, but you can see how as they make their way through the Porsche curves that Viper is the stronger of the two for the Porsche curve sequence by the best part of 3 attempts, as Muller now makes his way on the run down towards the Ford chicanes, and this is where it swings back in the favour of Muller temporarily as you've got the little straight. As we say hello to Pepsi GT in the chat as well, and we're hearing from THG TS040 here in the chat that he feels it's a very interesting battle for the podium, and he thinks by the end of the stint Carroll will be ahead. Well, we will told you to that. I think right now, given the fact this gap is oscillating and the fact that Tom is only really holding on because of the straight line speed, I think Tom's got a lot of pressure on him in order to nail the exit out of each corner. As Joe, I thought he was fainting to go into the pits, and I was going to say, okay, Joe, that's a little bit unexpected, but he decides not to in the end. That just looked a little bit near the mark. But I think Tom, if he makes one mistake now, one minor mistake, Joe is going to be there, and that is the thing that's on his mind. I do also think that if Joe is able to get into that slipstream of Tom down the straight, he won't be able to stay in it for too long because Tom will pull away, but he will try and do some fuel saving, and that will give him the jump. Because given the fact that the refuel rate based on our fuel guns is 4 litres per second or 4% per second, however you want to phrase it, because we take 100% or 100 litres of fuel, if he's able to save, let's say for example 8 litres by comparison with Tom, that is effectively the region of 2 seconds that he'll be able to jump in the pits, and that would be enough to put him right alongside Tom coming out the pits effectively. As you can see now as they come into Tetra Rouge for the 11th time of asking, that Joe definitely getting close, and I think Tom has had a little bit of a struggle there because it's almost now down to a second, 1.1 seconds, but Joe will now start to fall back. But this is the carrot he needs, the whole carrot and stick situation, where I think Joe will be feeling that he has got the the momentum on his side, and he will have the motivation, the fact he's getting a bigger picture of Tom every time they come out of Tetra Rouge, and that is what he'll be looking for. And this is, of course, the closest battle on circuit right now, as we see Belkin into the pits from P8 as the crew come out here. And what tyres did Devlin Calypso put on? He's put the racing hards on and put in a fuel tank of fuel here. So Devlin deciding to go to the end, I reckon, on the hard tyre and a full tank. Now, the hard tyre around here, I reckon, is going to be somewhere in the region of about 4 seconds slower than the soft and about 2 seconds slower than the medium. The delta being medium at 2 seconds slower than the soft, let's say, on average, and it's a further 2 seconds to the hard. Now, for the purposes of Devlin here, I don't think this is to get him into too much of a fight. It might be to get him into the battle with Netta, should Netta make a mistake somewhere. But I think really people will be using this data to know what the hard's capable of. And really, oh goodness me, Devlin, that is not where you want to be. I think he's been able to avoid the wall, however. Devlin just disappearing there. What happened to the Belgian? Well, as we ride on board with him here, you're going to see he goes for Indianapolis here. And on that hard tyre, he's trying to get the tyre switched on. As he makes his way into the braking zone for Arnage, he just brakes way too late on a hard tyre. He misses his braking point by the best part of 50 metres, but it gets it caught in the gravel nicely, and that rotates it back in for him. So he was able to save the car, but Devlin really struggling on those hard tyres. He needs to get those tyre temps up, and they take the best part of 2 laps to get tyre temps up on hards around here, and Devlin being caught out of that nonetheless. Now, what about Belkin? Well, he's put another set of racing softs on here, and he's put in a full fuel tank. Now, he did have 43% on the fuel after 40 minutes, so I'm wondering whether Belkin now is going to try and go to the end on these tyres, or he's going for a 2-stop here. Place your predictions, of course. I think this may be a 2-stop, because I think to go that long, he's got to do a lot of fuel saving. As he makes his way down towards the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. I mean, if Belkin is going for a overhaul here in terms of he's pitting early on the 1-stop, that is going to be an absolute gamble on the strategy. If he can make it work out and jump back ahead of Netta and get himself potentially towards Enrico, well, my goodness, that would be something fantastic. But we'll wait and see, as the British driver has rejoined in P9 right now and is going to be chasing after Netta, who's 8 seconds up the road. Now, Netta, by comparison, hasn't pitted as of yet, and the majority of our drivers have still yet to pit. Particularly our top 5 have yet to pit, as we see that Netta coming into that braking zone for the second of the chicanes down the Mulsanne here. And we look back up front and we see our race leaders continuing around, and Viper, I think it was a mistake a couple of laps ago which saw that gap come down, because Muller has now dropped back to 6.7 seconds back, and Viper definitely up in the wick every time Muller even dares get a little bit closer. And it does look as though the American is feeling very in control, but he gets it a little bit sideways there out of turn 3, out the second part of the Dunlop chicane, and he's got to be oh so careful, has the American. He makes one mistake here, and then he's got to go around the entirety of lap, particularly if he was to pick up damage on the car, engine damage even more so, because we are running heavy damage here, folks. There's no magical repair out on circuit. The fairies don't come out of Le Mans here. Instead, it is the case that our drivers will have to make it into the pits and box, and we can see that Muller right now is really pushing, but of course he's just not able to take a same line as Viper through, say, Tetra Rouge, and that's where the gaps open up. He's got the straight line speed by comparison with Viper. The DBR9 just being geared that much better by comparison with Viper's V12 Vantage, but as soon as we get to the corners, that's where Viper's just opened up that gap little by little, and it is close between these two. But I think if Viper can keep this up, he will feel safe. But in the battle for P3, I should point out that Tom right now is being really closed up by Carol Joe, but I think Joe's made a mistake somewhere, because he was off the racing line there, and he is going to close off a bit through Tetra Rouge, but it didn't look right from Joe. I didn't see him go the full extension of the racing line, so he's going to miss out on being in the tow briefly versus Tom here, as we look back and take a look what happened. So as he makes his way up into turns 5 and 6 here, you're going to see, I think he might get a little bit wrong on turn 6 and just get bounced by the curb. And in fact, no, it's not the case. He just decided to flick on the hazards there. Perhaps he had some connectivity issues with, say, steering wheel or something, because Carajo had to briefly pause there. You could see the hazards came whacking on and then come off of it. But that is the case. I think Carajo just having a bit of difficulty. Hopefully it's nothing major in terms of technical issues, because that would deprive us with a fantastic fight, which we'd love to see as they make their way down. But Carajo definitely right now, I think, just experiencing some slight technical issues with the car, but we will hope that it's nothing too serious as he makes his way down. But Tom really pulling away now. In fact, that car does not look as though it's using the full engine power right now, because that gap is opening up at a very drastic rate of knots, and hopefully Joe has not got an issue. Now we look further back, of course, and we can see Dankert 17 seconds behind. Well, sorry, no, still not 17 seconds behind. 17 seconds ahead of Don Siegel, but he's closing up very rapidly. He's 34.5 seconds behind Kawajo right now as the American, and he'll be looking to try and pull away from Don Siegel, at least keep that gap open as long as humanly possible, because otherwise Don's going to come back and take it. But remember, Don is on the medium right now. He's got past Enrico, and again, that's happened off camera. Unfortunately, we haven't quite seen that overtake, but one thing that is worth noting, that Don, on those racing mediums, he will have to pit for fuel at some point. So if he can't get past Dankert or get close to him by the end of this stint, particularly on the fuel situation, then Dankert's going to be in a really good situation come going into the second half of the race. Now, I'm just checking in with our organisers here, folks, and I'm not hearing anything, or down at the pit lane, I'm not hearing anything about Kawajo's car here, so I think perhaps he just had a very brief technical issue that he's got resolved now, but that did look a little bit of a worry there, as all our drivers continue to make their way round, and we look a bit further back, and we can see that it is the case that Enrico is closing up to Don Siegel a little bit. Once again, Don Siegel picking up a time penalty there for track limits. And perhaps he'll be able to get into that fight as we look further up front, and we see that Viper now has got the back marker of Devlin Calypso, immediately gets out of the way at the Porsche curves there. The blue flags are out and Devlin immediately reacting to it, as meanwhile in the battle for P3 we see Kawajo 2.9 seconds behind Tom as they accelerate down towards the Porsche curves once again. And we look further around the circuit right now, and we see that Dankert in that lonely P5 as we talked about earlier, and Belkin, well, he's the best part of a minute behind Enrico, and he is 15.2 seconds ahead of Netta. Now Netta, by comparison, has not pitted. In fact, what has happened to Netta? He has dropped all the way down the order. Let's just take a look and see if there was an incident or something on those lines. Not quite. Well, we haven't been able to catch it, but I think there's been an off for Netta because he was ahead of Belkin, but Belkin now has jumped him by a sizable margin. So not sure what's happened there, to be honest with you folks. And then further back we can see that Devlin is about to be lapped by Muller. In terms of our battle for P6, well, Enrico is being dropped now by Siegel. He's being dropped by the best part of half a second over the course of each sector by the looks of things. Enrico 2.9 seconds down. And Don making his way up towards the start of the Porsche curves once again. Now, I think the majority of the field, as is being called out in our race chat by Illusions right now, the majority of the field, we can expect at least our top 5 to come charging into the pit shortly. Now, again, the question for Don Siegel will be, will he pit with everybody, or will he go long and try and be in the way of other drivers, only then to pit afterwards? Now, if I was in Don, you'd have to go for the latter rather than the former on the racing medium, because you've had to go for this gamble because of the damage you picked up. So now you need to find a way to compromise other drivers' races, without, of course, causing them to crash. But the idea would be that the Austrian would essentially stay out as long as he can on those mediums until the fuel tank goes dry, of which he's got about 23% fuel remaining right now. So I think what the Austrian could do, he could probably get in a couple more laps ahead of the other drivers who are going to pit ahead of him, and then just simply come into the pits and load the car a little bit lighter on fuel to go into that second half of the race, into what is effectively his second stint. Albeit it's his third stint because he's pitted, as we see that Tom has picked up a 1.5 second penalty, and that will be for track limits at Tetra Rouge. So Tom has made a major error here, and he will need to burn that penalty, and Kawajo will be smelling blood in the water here, and no, now this is his time to get closer to Tom and bring that M6 within striking distance here, as they're due for pit stop soon. And Tom having that penalty, that is going to frustrate him a little bit, so he's got to find a way to burn that time within a good period of time, because otherwise Kawajo will capitalise on that, I'm sure. As they both make their way down into the second of the Mulsanne chicanes then, and you can see Kawajo not closed up on the straight. But as soon as we talk about the corners, that's where he's going to close up. And Tom was keeping the consistency, you're right there, Pepsi, but then just one little mistake, and that 1.5 second penalty could turn things entirely upside down. I think we've all been there. You pick up one penalty and it rattles you a little bit, and Tom will not want that to mentally rattle him, and he'll just want to focus on things and get back into that consistency zone. He'll want to be in the Zen zone and just keep it together as he burns a bit of the penalty in the braking zone towards Mulsanne corner here. A smart place to burn it. He's burnt half of it already. He will lose a bit of time, but in fact, burning it there, coming out of the corner, you'll see that Kawajo's going to be very close here as we jump on board with Tom. And we look back, and I think Joe will be in the slipstream. But again, remember, Tom has so much straight line acceleration as he peels back onto the racing line here. And doing that little weave as well will just take away a bit of Joe's benefit on the straight. And now look how Joe is now being dropped. And that is the straight line speed that Aston Martin. And Tom has played burning that penalty perfectly. He knew he could get away with it if he burnt it in a major acceleration zone, because he would just open that gap back up. And it is a good thing he's done it, and as a result of that, now it's a case of can he maintain that gap after the corners. Remember, we've got the Porsche curves coming up after Arnage, and it will be one of those situations whereby Joe wants to be as close as possible. You can see he is trying to get as close as possible as they make their way in the long run down now. But of course, as they get towards fifth gear at this point, you can see Joe has closed it up to 3.5 temps. But now that gap is starting to creep back open, and it's the case that the M6 just cannot hang with the Aston Martin. Now, can Joe keep it in the dirty air and close behind Tom in that dirty air? If he can, he'll gain so much time by comparison. And you can see, in fact, as we look forward, he is all over the back of Tom here, and Tom really struggling to drop Joe this time, and Joe able to run that car very smoothly in the dirty air. In fact, so much so he's having to back out of it through the second half of the Porsche curves. He's over the back as Tom's having to really brake heavily into the exit point. And now as they make their way in the long run down towards the Ford chicane here, Tom is going to be sweating under this pressure because Joe is all over the back of him, and he will know he can now potentially strike. But will Joe look for the move? No, he won't. He tried to open up as much of the circuit as possible to straight line it through the chicane, and as they make their way through the final two corners to go on to lap number 14, it'll be the case now that Tom will pull away initially a little bit, but Techerouge is now where it all comes down to for these two drivers. If Tom can nail Techerouge, he may be able to hold off Joe. If he can't, then Joe will be alongside him. It'll be a drag race which Tom will win, but then Joe will find himself in a very, very strong striking position here. So as they make their way through the Dunlop chicane, then you can see that immediately Joe starts to close it up a little bit. He's back in that slipstream zone only temporarily before Tom opens it back up once again. Now they're going to go back into left to right of turns 5 and 6. As they make their way through, now we've got the concept of Techerouge ahead. Who is going to do a stronger to? Well, you can see that Joe is closing up immensely through the right hand. And now into Techerouge they go. Will it be Joe's time to strike? He comes through the corner here. He's all over the back of Tom. And you can see he has to pull out early because Tom isn't able to get the acceleration. Joe is technically up to P3, albeit for the best part of only half a second before Tom, now on the outside, sweeps back ahead, and Joe immediately jumps back into the slipstream, but Tom immediately pulls to the inside. A little bit of a weave there. He gets one move, and Joe, I think, will be saying, okay, Tom, you get the one, but no more than that. But he knows he can't stay ahead because Tom has the straight line speed down into the braking zone for the Mulsanne chicane. They go into the first of the two chicanes. You can see Joe sliding around behind him here, opening up the rear end of that M6, chasing after Tom, all over the back of him here, and we can see they've both got traffic ahead of him in the form of Devlin Calypso. Now Tom would love to get that toe off of Devlin because that would give him a major speed boost, and as a result enable him to pull away even faster from Joe. That gap opening up once again here, but the question of course from Joe's perspective is, okay, well what do I do at this point? Do I fuel burn or do I fuel save? Do I try and burn the fuel to get even closer so I can pip Tom into the pits, or do I decide, you know what, I'm going to save the fuel and jump him in the pits by having to refuel less? Now in Joe's position, I think you've got to be really tactical about this one and accept the fact that Tom is always going to beat you in a straight line race. There's no way you're going to beat Tom in a straight line drag race here. If he's going to do the pass, it will need to be out of Arnage into the Porsche curves, and he'll have to do it in a way where it kills Tom's momentum up into the Porsche curves if he's going to do it. As Devlin moves out of the way for both drivers here, and you can see that Joe is trying to get the toe for Devlin, but he's not able to get the double toe, and as a result he has to pick a line, but Tom is able to come sweeping through there, and Joe now finds himself falling back a little bit. But as they come out of Mulsanne corner, it's a result that you can see that Tom is going to pull away as Devlin gets it a little bit wrong there. Those hard tyres catching about once again, but we focus on our battle for P3, and they make their way down towards Indianapolis now, and Tom has been able to make a small break here, and he'll be grateful for this as he makes his way down towards Indianapolis. But of course he's got to nail the corner and hope that Joe doesn't absolutely nail the corner, which he's been doing timelessly over the last 13 laps, and it'll be the 14th time of asking, can Joe do it again? As they make their way down into the lift and brake, will it be the case that Joe closes it up, or will Tom absolutely hit it spot on? Well, Joe is going to naturally close it up a little bit, but nowhere near enough, and I think Tom actually will feel pretty safe now as they go into Arnage here. It'll be the Porsche curves up ahead, but again, Joe will not be close enough to potentially go for the pressure or the move on Tom through the Porsche curves. as they accelerate their way then down towards the curves, and you can see 1.7 seconds will be the gap before they get into the lift or the braking zone for the set of corners. In fact, it'll be 1.8 seconds by the time we get there. And our race leaders, meanwhile, I can tell you there's no change up front, although the gap has opened up by a further second. But we come back to that battle for P3, and now this is where the BMW machine will really start to close up versus Tom. You can see already it's taken 3 attempts out. It's going to take another couple of attempts with the left into right combination here, and then they'll be going back into that left hand, and that's the weakest corner for Tom. You can see that Aston Martin just does not want to rotate through the corner, and meanwhile Joe all over the back of him, and look how much that gap has closed up. It's down to 3 attempts. Joe is as close as he's ever been. Will he go for the move, or will he pit early? We'll wait and see. No, he's behind him still, and they continue their way through the Ford chicanes here, and Joe is not going to give it up here, but neither is Tom as they make their way through, and Joe is so close. He probably wishes he could reach out and just grab onto the back of Tom's car to be pulled along and not lose the slipstream over the distance right now as they make their way onto lap 15 up towards turn 1 once again. You love to see it, ladies and gents, but after an hour to see our P3 battle, only 3 attempts between the two of them. It's the closest battle on circuit, and we're going to stay with it for a bit longer if you don't mind as they make their way through the Dunlop chicane. Joe versus Tom. We ride on board and look back from Tom right now. You're riding on board the Aston Martin DBR9 GT1 as they make their way into turns 5 and 6. Left into right they go. Joe all over the back of him, and you can just see how Tom cannot get the car to flow through the corners anymore. It just wants to straight line. He's had to force it to, and Joe backs off initially, but now look at them lunge. He's going to go for it. He's going to go for the long shot move here out of Tetra Rouge, but will Tom have the acceleration? He's going to gradually build up speed. In fact, he's got it now. The acceleration is there, and Joe needs to react quickly to this and realise, okay, I'll go get in that slipstream and stay behind him. And once again, Tom doing the cheeky move of switching over to the inside to kill the toe for Joe. And as a result of that, now Tom is going to open that gap up to 3 attempts, and Joe has got to think to himself right now, okay, where can I get into a position where I can get alongside him and beat him into a corner? Well, again, I think the only place he's going to be able to do that is from the run out of Arnage up into the Porsche curves. Alternatively, if he gets the mother of all runs through the Porsche curves down in towards the Ford chicanes, that's the only 2 places where the straight isn't long enough for Tom to engage the 5th gear and the 6th gear of that Aston Martin. But it is so close between these two. You could put a hair between the two of them and have no further space as we look further around on circuit right now. And I can tell you further around the field that we've got Don Siegel. He has closed up to Dankert. He's got that gap down to 8 seconds right now, albeit he's not going to be close enough at the end of this lap should Dankert pit as per what we suspected in his scheduled stop. And then we have got Enrico, who's 1 minute and 2 seconds ahead of Belkin. Belkin, of course, had made that early pit stop and now going as long as possible. And Netta, well, he's 43 seconds ahead of Devlin Calypso, but 1 minute 40 behind Belkin. So right now our rear guys are all spaced out, but we come back to this battle for P3 once again, and you can see that Tom, well, he's pulled that gap open as per the norm, but will Joe get a good run here through Molzankon? He does get a decent run. Tom goes a little bit deep, but you'll notice that Tom's able to get the throttle on nice and early, and that enables the gap to continue opening up here. Meanwhile, up front, I can tell you that the gap between Viper and Muller has come down to 6.4 seconds. So there has been a little bit of a lap time trade-off between the two of them right now as they're coming to the end of their respective stints. And you can see on that telemetry right now, look how worn those left-hand tyres are of Viper's car. Muller's, by comparison, I haven't had barely anywhere by comparison, and although he's used up a lot more fuel, I think Muller's going to be in this lap. And what about Tom versus, of course, Kawajoe? Well, you can see that Tom and Kawajoe, well, Joe's got a bit more fuel by comparison with Tom, but he has taken about the same amount of tyres as Tom has in terms of tyre life. So our top 4 right now all getting ready to make their pit stops, and our race leader into the pits, and Muller, I'm sure, is going to follow him in here as he has to burn a penalty, and he makes his way into the pits from P2. So they're both in, and then it will be who out of these two is going to pit, if either of them. Will Joe go one more lap, or will he decide to pit? Because Tom's going to be pitting at the end of this lap, I'm sure of that one, as we see Muller comes in on 2% to follow Viper at 7%, and we know that gap has opened up as it normally does, but now it's the case that Joe will be chasing after him. He'll close that gap up, particularly as they come through the right into left combination. Here it comes, the end of the Porsche curves, and again Tom will have that bad rash of an M6 all over his rear end as they make their way out here. It's as close as it's ever been. Now, will they both pit? That is the big question as they make their way along. Will Tom duck in, or will he go one more lap and have to literally burn the tank to its end? He pulls into the pits, and Kawajo continues out there. Right, so he is going for the overcut. Tom is going for the undercut here. Who is it going to work out for? Well, Joe, if Tom had 8% fuel, then Joe, by comparison, has got approximately 15% fuel remaining. So Joe here going longer, and I think the idea behind this is that Joe will have a better car for the end of the race, i.e. he'll have one less lap tyre wear on the tyres, he'll be able to load the car with lighter amounts of fuel, and he'll be able to hunt Tom down by comparison. Now, of course, he has come out behind Viper, 3.5 seconds is the gap, but Viper haven't gone to another set of softs at a full tank of fuel. He won't mind that. And Muller is 5.7 seconds back and has a 1 second penalty. So as a result of that, as the gap between Muller and Viper has now opened up to 9.1 seconds, what with the fuel load change, as well with the fact that Muller had less fuel in the car going into the pit, so he's had to refuel for longer. This is going to play into Kawajo's hands in the fact that he won't have anybody trying to get past him. As we see in terms of our other pitters, we've got Don Siegel into the pits. He's coming in on 1% fuel, and Dankert into the pits as well. Dankert was ahead of Don Siegel as they came in from what we recall. And we know that Enrico Playborst right now is coming through to complete an 11 lap, but he's not going to be pitting on this one, given the fact that he's still got enough fuel to go for one more lap. So some drivers really trying to take these stints as long as humanly possible right now. But Tom has come out of the pits, he's filled the car back up. He's had to go for a full fuel tank as well. And now he's going on to that second stint. Of course, this out lap is going to be critical for Tom. He needs to nail this lap in order to make sure that he doesn't end up in a situation where potentially Kawajo is all over the back of him or jumps him coming out of the pits. Now, Enrico Playborst with P5 right now, of course, and we can see that he's going to go for that one extra lap as Don Siegel and Dankert in the pits. Well, Dankert's coming out, of course. He's bound to come out ahead of Siegel at this point. But what will Siegel do? Will he go back onto a set of softs? He does indeed. And he is only the best part of approximately 5 seconds behind Dankert. So Dankert has got to try and hold off Siegel for the rest of the race if he can, but I think the Austrian is going to be a little bit more than a match for him given the qualifying pace and the fact that Siegel has closed up to him on mediums versus Dankert softs. But we'll wait and see as Belkin, of course, is making his way around. He pitted earlier than everybody else in terms of our top 8 drivers, and then Netta right now making his way around the circuit. He pitted quite recently. He's down in P9, and then Devlin Calypso and gone to the hard, having a very difficult time on that hard tyre and just trying to bring that car home as it currently stands. Now we look back, of course, to our race leader. You can see in the rear view camera shot you've got Kawajo, who's yet to pit, but our race leader doing everything he needs to right now as we take a quick sip of water, a brief breather, and then we'll give you the recap of the last hour and what to expect in the final hour of this race. So if you've recently joined us, it's a case that we're halfway through a Lobby A, the first 2 hours of tonight's 4-hour endurance event, and we can see that at this point in time, SDM Viper is our race leader. Now the story behind Viper, this has been one where Viper had a very strong qualifying session. He got on pole by over a second, and he hasn't had it all his own way. He had a little bit of a fight with THG Muller at the start of the race, but after the first couple of laps, due to some mistakes by Muller, particularly track limits penalties being incurred, Muller dropped down to P2, and then Viper's just gradually opened up the gap between himself and the South African. Now, Viper does have a 7-second advantage over Kawajo, the Belgian driver who's yet to pit. Of course, every driver who I don't say has pitted is the case that they've already pitted. So, for example, Viper has already taken his stop. We're expecting most drivers to do a one-stop here, but Kawajo in a battle for P3 versus THG's Tom at 79. Both of the Belgian drivers being literally chalk and cheese. What the M6 of Kawajo being the handling car and being very strong in the handling sections, there as Tom 79's Aston Martin DBR9 being very strong on the straight, and Kawajo so much so not able to capitalise with any slipstream as he goes for one more lap. Now, Joe, this is a gamble. This is a huge gamble from the BMW driver here, because this means he is going to have tyres which are in a huge prime by comparison with Tom's come the end of this race. He is being closed up by Muller, but remember, Muller is in a battle for the lead, not in a battle for P3, so this is only natural order right now. But really, Joe battling with Tom, and when Tom came into the pit on lap number 15, the gap between the two of them was only a second, but Tom was really starting to hit the cliff in terms of tyre wear. But Kawajo, with the fuel saving plus also the tyre management, is able to go 2 laps longer, and that will give him much fresher tyres and a lighter car come the end of the race, and he'll be able to really strike at Tom. Now, Muller in P3, he will re-inherit P2, of course. He has been our challenger for the race lead, having qualified P2, but he's just not had the ability to get close enough to Viper after the opening little battle on laps 1 and 2. We then got Tom, who, of course, is likely to re-inherit P3 come when Kawajo comes into the pits. But, of course, Tom has that deficit now. He's going to be doing 2 extra laps on his racing soft tyres, which he pitted and changed to. Much like the other drivers who are up in the leading positions right now, he will have 2 more laps on his tyres as he goes a bit deep into the Dunlop chicane, and he can't afford to make mistakes like that on these laps, because that could give Kawajo a major advantage as we see Enrico Playboost now coming into the pits. Enrico coming into the pits from what was P5, but effectively a P7 out of the circuit, going very long on those soft tyres, and as a result now the Mercedes AMG driver will drop back down the order as we see that Dan Kurt, who is going to re-inherit P5 very shortly, it will be the case that he is being chased right now by Don Siegel, the Austrian driver who had a major error on Arge on lap number 3. He was up in P3 at that point, and he's doing a recovery drive right now, and he's almost back into the top 5 and chasing after Dan Kurt, and is closing down. He's taken about 2.5 seconds a lap out. Dan Kurt is the Austrian versus the American, and we look forward to seeing the battle between them two shortly. So with Enrico coming out the pits soon, and he'll be back in P7, it's Belkin, who's currently in P8, who pitted after 40 minutes to go into a set of races off to the full fuel tank. We believe he's trying to make it an offset 1 stop to try and go long on this second stint to the end. We might be gambling with the 2 stop. He's got the space to gamble with it because the highest he can currently achieve is P8 based on the gaps between the drivers, but it's worth a gamble in case it can pay off. Netta Bass, meanwhile, in P9, having made his single stop, the Lexus RCF driver hasn't seen too much action. Had a bit of a battle with Don Siegel, who tried coming through the field after his incident on Arge, which caused him to pit at the end of lap number 2. But Netta eventually succumbing to the strength of the Austrian, and really in a lonely P9, as if then Calypso, who decided to go to the racing hard, going for a relatively early stop. It's not really working out for Calypso. Those racing hard tyres not providing the grip of the racing soft or the racing medium, and he's really having to battle the tyres all the way around the circuit. Now, what I can tell you is that over the course of this current lap, Kawajo is being reeled in quite immensely by Muller. It's 2.1 seconds the gap now. And this means that Kawajo could find himself in a position where he has to go partially defensive versus Muller as he makes his way into the pits. Although I suspect Muller will notice that Kawajo is due for a pit stop very shortly. He'll know that, given the fact that Joe hasn't pitted yet. And he'll probably be thinking to himself, okay, Joe, surely you got a pit soon. That car can't last forever on its fuel. And as a result of that, he won't want to fight it too hard. I think he'll want Joe instead to try and clear Netta out the way for him as they both make their way down towards the Porsche curves. Of course, Netta being a lap down on these two, he will be expected to obey those blue flags and get out the way. But what I can see as well is that Don Siegel is now 2.6 seconds and still closing up to Dan Kurt. We are keeping our eyes on this battle, folks. We will let you know when it's about to kick off. But Dan Kurt doing a very good job of holding off the charged Austrian right now, albeit it's in the handling zone, so I think where Siegel is reeling in Dan Kurt very gradually. Now Netta there moving out the way for Kawajo, doing it through the Porsche curves. They're a very difficult place to obey blue flags, but very well done by Netta, as we can see that Muller's also going to do the same, although it's going to be a little bit of a drag race between the two of them down towards the Ford chicane. But finally Kawajo coming into the pit. The crew are going to be coming out very shortly. Just needs to nail this pit stop. There he comes, and now the big question of course will be with that 39-second gap between himself and Tom, as Tom's making his way into the Porsche curves right now. Who's going to come out in front? I think Tom's going to come out in front, and I think the gap will have expanded to approximately 5 to 6 seconds. But the thing is, Kawajo will have the tyres right at the end of the race, and those will make him very strong come the final couple of laps, and he will be stripping time out of Tom like no man's business, as we see he makes his way through it. And Kawajo still be pulling into his pit box right now is the BMW M6 driver, so they're going to be changing those tyres. He's going on to another set of softs, and Tom meanwhile is coming up into the Ford chicane right now, and it will be the case that he will re-inherit the lead, so they're going to have to put the fuel in Kawajo's car, albeit they may not have to put 100% fuel here, given the fact he's gone long and he's only got 51 minutes remaining in this race. But Tom is going to re-inherit P3 right now. He's 38.3 seconds down our second place man of TXG Mercer. Tom's not battling for P2, but Kawajo is still in the pits, and he's coming out of the pits on 91% fuel, so that gap is not as great as what we thought it would be. That gap is in fact only going to be, in fact it is going to be in the region of 5 seconds. We got it spot on there, and as a result Kawajo now has 5 seconds that he'll be closing down over the course of each subsequent lap, remembering at first that Tom will have the advantage because on his tyres, whilst they're in the high grip zone, they will have the cornering ability plus the straight line speed, whereas Joe will be about the cornering. But once Tom's tyres start to hit the cliff, that's where Joe will really come alive. Now in the battle for P5, I should point out, Dan Kurt right now is feeling a lot of pressure from the Austrian of Siegel. We can see right on board with the American right now as he makes his way out the final corner onto lap number 18. It is the Mercedes AMG driver. It's AMG versus Aston Martin power, of course. Britain versus Germany. Britain behind and Germany riding on board with here. And I think the question will be for Don, where does he get it done? Well, he knows that the Mercedes driver is stronger down the straights by comparison with the Tudors running on that V12 Vantage. And that 6-litre engine will do well in the slipstream. But at the same time, I think he knows that it's going to be in the handling zones and he'll try to get it done up towards Indianapolis, because then you've got the handling corner of Arnage plus the short run down towards the Porsche curves, and that's where Siegel can make the break. But you see here as we come through 5 and 6, it's the case that the Austrian is getting ever closer here in that dirty air. Now they make their way to Tete Rouge, the corner that makes or breaks the run to Mulsanne, and we see both drivers get a good run there through the corner as Siegel is slightly in that slipstream zone. He's just in there enough to be able to start capitalising, but you can see how the gap is only very slowly starting to come down as we jump to the exterior cameras once again. And it won't be the case, I think, that the Austrian's going to have the space to go for the move down into the first of the chicanes, but over the course of the coming next chicane and also the Mulsanne corner, that's where he will close up. Now he's in that slipstream zone. I think we could be looking for a move from Mulsanne down into Indianapolis. That would be the best place to do it. As Siegel is getting ever closer right now, and as they make their way to the second third of the straight, you can see he's the closest he's ever wanted to be, but he has to play this smart. He has to think, okay, I've got to get past the American and then I've got to make a break for it. I can't let Dankert just simply come back at me on Indianapolis. So I think that's what you're seeing. Siegel is not closing up as much as perhaps we'd expect this time around. Instead, he's upshifting early through the gears to save a bit of fuel and to make sure that he doesn't gain too rapidly, and then the overspeed will come down into Mulsanne or to Indianapolis. He may do it out of Mulsanne into Indianapolis. He may go for a second fuel saving run here and then decide to do it on the final long straight, because that will be the safest place to do it for him. But we'll wait and see as they make their way out. He'll need to stay in that slipstream zone, of course, in order to be able to get into an attacking position as they both now charge down towards the right-hander. It's a long way away, of course. We've got the rise up here on the road before we come down into the corner, but we've got a long way to go for that corner, and when they do get there, it'll be the case who's going to be brave on the brakes, and will Siegel go for it? Well, he's holding back right now. I think he is playing what we predicted. He's waiting to go for the strike here, and it will be up into Indianapolis. So as they come out this corner here, we ride on board with Siegel, and let's see if he goes for the push. Does he go all in here and start to rev the car out? Well, he is starting to gain, and in fact, it does seem as though he is building up speed. In fact, he is closing that gap nice and quickly, so this is where he's decided to go for it. He's going to try and get as close as possible. That's the first kink. He's running out of time. He's got the second kink coming up. He's getting ever closer now. You ride on board as he's getting closer and closer to the back of that Mercedes, and now come up into the right-hander lift. He's not close enough to go for a move here, so he's going to have to wait until Arnage up into Porsche curves if he's going to go for it. But you can see that Danker, by comparison, not feeling as confident on the brakes into Indianapolis, and as a result, the Austrian is the closest he's ever been as he makes his way out the corner here. But now Arnage and Danker able to get a good run out the corner here versus Siegel as he makes his way through the corner then, and I think in fact the Austrian has not got close enough here, and the American I think has done enough to hold him off, or has he, as they come up towards the Porsche curves. Then will we see him move up the inside, or will it be the case that he waits until a little bit later? He's making his way along here. In fact, he's pulling out of the slipstream a little bit. I think he realised that he can't get it done. Instead, he's pulling out the slipstream to give himself some clear air, and also just to keep the tyre temperatures a little down on what they're being overheated to as they make their way through the right into left now. And you can see he can flow so closely behind the American here. The Aston Martin has been tuned to run in the dirty air of another car, and as a result of that, it's given him the ability to stay close. I think that move's going to be on come the next lap right now as he's all over the back, albeit a little bit of lag as well, but that's not going to deter him in chasing after the American as they make their way up towards the braking zone for the first of the four chicanes here. You can see that Siegel, the closest he's ever been, he's looking for a little move on the inside, just trying to get in the mirrors of Dankert to say to him, hey buddy, I'm here, I'm coming for that position whether you like it or not. I hope you've been keeping P5 warm for me, as he makes his way on to lap number 19. Both drivers of course will want this position. Dankert more than Siegel, of course, because he'll know that Siegel made that mistake earlier and he's having to make a recovery drive. And you see Dankert using the full width there of entry into turn one. He can't afford to go too wide beyond that white line because he can pick up a penalty by going wide. In fact, he's picked up a 2.5 second penalty for the run wide there. Well, I think the automated stewards are a little bit brutal, but oh goodness me, Dankert not able to put up a defence. That's been taken away from him. That is so unfortunate. Siegel up into P5 right now, and he'll probably be grinning from ear to ear thinking to himself, well, I didn't have to fight for that one in the end, thank goodness for that. But that is a real shame. But all the same, Dankert now will try and find his way back in, but I think Siegel will gradually pull away as they both make their way onto the Mulsanne straight for the 19th time of asking. Now looking further around, we can see that the gap between Tom and Cawajo has opened up to 6.2 seconds. And remember, it does oscillate, so that gap is not 100% accurate as Belkin decides to come into the pits for a second stop. So he's going for, oh, he's picked up damage somewhere, in fact, as Belkin. I'm not sure where he's picked that up, but he's picked up the damage. So this is not a scheduled stop for the British driver. So that is a little bit of a problem, but he's got a 2-minute gap over Netabas. So as a result, he can afford the pit stop. It's not as though this is going to destroy his race. The only thing, of course, is it will stop him from chasing after Enrico Playborst, who is in P7 and pulling away. The gap was 25.5 seconds between them come when he came into the pits, but now that gap is going to open up massively as a result of that mistake. I'm not sure where he's had that incident, as we see that Netabas right now making his way into Indianapolis here. And in fact, Belkin has come out of the pits here, and he has not, well, he's taken on a fresh set of tyres, but he hasn't put any more fuel in the car. So I think he was definitely trying to go for an offset 1 stop here, but he's had to turn it into a 2 stop. And Belkin with a 55.7 second gap to Enrico. I mean, he can try and close that down, but I don't think he's got enough time to be able to close it down versus Enrico. But we'll wait and see. He'd have to strip out the best part of approximately what would be, I would say, in the region of 6 seconds a lap on Enrico to close it down for the end of the race. But never say never. Belkin's been in a position before. He was in that position at Bathurst. We had to chase down the guy in front of him, and he did it over the final sector of the, over the final stint of the race. Never say never from the British driver. When he's got something in his eyes, he'll go and chase it down. That is certain. But right now, Viper 20 seconds ahead. In fact, Muller, I think, has got something wrong somewhere, because that gap has opened up dramatically. The South African having a very difficult day on this second stint. That gap has opened up so wide, in fact, as we see Viper has set the fastest lap down to 3:53.895, almost qualifying lap now, as Tom, meanwhile, is being chased down by Carajo. And remember, that gap 8 seconds right now, but watch how it condenses down to approximately what will be 7 seconds come the end of the Porsche curves, and that's where that Mercedes, that's where the BMW M6 just has so much performance through the medium speed corners by comparison with the Aston Martin. And now it's the case, it will open back up again as they go into the power sections for lap number 20. Well, of course, Tom, if you look at his tyres, you can see he's starting to pick up some scrub on the front tyres in particular, and that will start to invoke understeer through the medium speed corners as he goes deeper. And if he doesn't manage to understeer or react to it, then that gives Carajo the ability to close up sooner. Let's both drivers go on to lap number 20. But we see that Don Siegel, meanwhile, in P5, he's got himself past Danker, and Danker is not able to catch up anymore. So now it's the case. Can he close down 44.8 seconds to Carajo in P4? Now remember, Don was in P3, but he was under a lot of pressure from Tom and Joe. Those three drivers all had very similar pace in qualifying at the start of the race. So I think unless any of our top four right now make a major mistake and pick up engine damage, I think Don has done the best he can for the recovery drive, and it's now at the mercy of the racing gods if the drivers in front of him have a major mistake or have a major incident. That'll be the big question, of course, and of course Don will probably be praying for something to happen up front. In the meantime, he'll of course keep putting in the strong laps, and that previous lap, to give you an idea, was a 3:58.3, and then he'll just then have to see what comes at the end of the race distance. Meanwhile, Danker falling away from Siegel. To give you an idea on that previous lap, it was a 4:02.2, so that gap does open up quite a bit over the course of each lap. Danker right now just not able to close that. And remember, he did have to burn that penalty at the start of his previous lap, and that's why the lap time's quite poor. But even then, you can see the gap is eking open very gradually. So I think Danker will be focusing on bringing this one home in P6 right now, unless Siegel makes a major mistake or picks up a penalty. Never say never, of course. Penalties have struck a lot of drivers here today for track limits, as we get a face full of a steward there walking along the side, or a marshal I should say. And then we can see that Enrico making his way up towards turn number 1 right now. The Dutchman with a 31.1 second deficit to Danker, and not closing it up, but also a 55.5 second gap to Belkin behind, who had to pit to get rid of that damage and take on a fresh set of tyres whilst doing so. I think you'll feel very comfortable, and the fact that Belkin has got that 1.5 minute gap to Netta, he'll feel that P8 is really on the cards right now, and he's going to try and keep it together, see if he can chase down Enrico, but he'll be expecting Enrico to have to pit in order to close that gap down or have a major mistake. Netta in P9, similar story right now in the no man's land, and Devlin all the way down in P10, carrying on the fight all the same as those racing. Well, he's gone to a set of racing mediums. He has pitted. Those hard tyres were just not possible to work with for Devlin, so he's decided to go on to the medium compound and make it work, as he is about to be lapped by Belkin, making his way down towards turn number 1. Now we can see that Viper, that gap has come down a little bit between himself and Muller over this lap. It's dropped down from 20 seconds down to 19. But I think it's the case that Viper can play with this gap. He's essentially able to toy with the gap and take off a little bit of the pace, perhaps eke it down to say 90% effort by comparison with 100%. It gives him a little bit of a breather, gives him time to build up a little bit of recovery, just in case he does need to use that pace later on. Say he should put the car in the wall, for example, or have a major error and then need to drive the wounded car home. He'll want to manage his stamina over the course of this race, as all our drivers will be. It's one of those things, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, this race. Even if it's just the first 2 hours of the 4-hour event, it's a marathon and not a sprint, and all drivers need to be wary of that. As we see, Tom has picked up a penalty. Now I believe that's been for Indianapolis. That was a 1-second penalty he picked up, but already as soon as these little penalties start to come in, Joe not having picked one up yet, as a result of that, Tom will now know that he's going to have to bleed time to Joe, and Joe in return will be aware of the fact, okay, I'm going to start reeling him in early. I don't have to pull down as much of a gap when my tyres are still fresher than his come the final 10 minutes of the race. And that's the thing Tom will not want in his mind. He will not want to accrue penalties like this, because when he has to burn them, he can burn them under trail braking into corners such as Mulsanne, alternatively Arnage, of course, or even Indianapolis. But the problem is when you trail brake like that to burn a penalty, you still lose the penalty time effectively, although you may lose a little bit less than the penalty. If it's a second penalty, you may lose say 7 tenths. As you see, he lifts out of it here, coming down onto the start finish line to commence lap number 21. But immediately watch how this gap now comes crushing down, as we see Joe as well having to burn a penalty there out of the corner. In fact, so both drivers getting penalties, but Joe less so, and 5.4 seconds now is Joe's gap to Tom. And that's the thing, that gap has come down overall now because of Tom's penalty. I think Joe may have had a half-second penalty he had to burn by comparison. So this is where it all starts to come in with 40 minutes to go. The pressure comes in, the tiredness kicks in, the legs are aching, you don't want to do it anymore, but you still got to do it. You've still got 39 more minutes. You've still got, if we assume every lap is 4 minutes long, you've still got the best part of what is 10 laps to go as a minimum, and your legs will be screaming, your arms will be kicking, and that's what the drivers will be feeling right now. They'll just want to get home. They'll want it over, of course. None more so than this man. He'll feel he's done the job already, and that 20-second lead is just something he could comfortably use to get himself home. As we see that Don Siegel has now pulled a 6.2 second gap in P5 over Dankert. So that gap has definitely opened up to a point where Dankert will be hoping Siegel makes another mistake at some point. But again, never say never. Tired legs can always be the doom of some people, as I've personally found out myself a number of times around the circuit, tired braking legs in particular, and forgetting to brake at Arnage. But nonetheless, our drivers will be very wary of that as they make their way onto laps 20 and 21, depending on which lap they're currently on. Our lead drivers all going on to lap 21, of course. As we look further around the field, and we can see that Devlin has been lapped by Belkin. And the only driver not to have lapped our P10 driver so far is Netta. But of course, this will be all good experience for Devlin. He'll realise that today it just hasn't worked out in terms of the strategy. And that's something, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I've just been informed in the chat, which is worth noting, as we saw there Devlin going a little bit wide going into the Porsche curves. So I thought we might have had an off. Is that this man right here, the American driver of Dankert, I've been informed by by TS040 in the chat that Dankert drives on a prosthetic leg. And that is an absolutely tremendous effort. I did not know that, and the fact that he's able to do that well, there it goes to show you, even if you have a major injury in life, it's nothing to stop you from getting into real-world motorsport, as we've seen with Billy Munger, for example, alternatively into sim racing, as you see from Dankert 77 here. Sim racing and indeed motorsport is for everyone, and Dankert is paying dividends to that, as we see Belkin coming into the pits again, and this time engine damage. What has happened to Belkin? He's picked that up. That must be Arnage, because he's picked that up on the lap quite late on. But the pit crew are going to have to fix that car. That is not good news. And in fact, we have got a little bit of a replay camera loop there. My apologies. That has decided to loop itself over and over. We've got that fixed now. So Belkin having a bad day at the races, and that could actually bring him into a situation whereby if he makes many more mistakes, then Netta Bass could be battling for P8 come the end of the race. As we go on to lap 22, and SDM Viper is continuing to push on, as we also say hello to Cy Potter, who is cheering on his teammate, of course, of SDM Viper, and hoping that Viper can bring it home. So that gives Cy Potter the best starting position come the second half of today's round, and indeed going into that lobby B. but making his way through turn at 5 and up into 6 right now. We can see that Viper keeping it nice and clean, keeping it well away from the edges of the circuit there. Very wary of running out onto the dirt on the exit of turn 6 before Tetrarudge, although almost goes a bit too wide there out of Tetrarudge, and I'm not sure if that was all the way beyond. I think he just about kept it on circuit, but I think Viper will be saying to himself right there, okay, that was probably the most we could ever take out of that corner. Let's not do that twice. As we see Muller right now making his way out towards Tetrarudge, the South African just not able to match Viper's lap time, and indeed having a similar run through Tetrarudge as Viper and keeping it on circuit. Both drivers really pushing their hardest here, and you can tell neither one of them wants to give up the race, or the winner thinks the race is over yet. But Tom, by comparison, burning another penalty here. And in fact, he's had to burn a sizable penalty. That looked like at least a 1.5 second penalty, because now Kawajo has got that gap down to 3 seconds come the start-finish line. And being within that 3 second zone so early here, I mean, to give you an idea on the telemetry, you can see, look at his tyres and the fact he's only started to get some graining on the front left in particular. Meanwhile, if we look at Tom's by comparison, and Tom is also running less fuel right now, you can see that he's got a much sizable, a much greater amount of wear on the front tyres, particularly that front left. So Tom is now starting to hit a little bit of an initial cliff on the tyre life, and it is going to be the case, I think, that Tom is going to find himself under that pressure from Kawajo a bit sooner than he would like. But of course, for Joe, to get close enough to Tom is one thing, to get past him here is a completely different thing. As you all know, on that first stint, they had that back and forth constantly for the 4 laps leading up to Tom's pit stop, and will it all kick off again early? The gap right now is 1.8 seconds. It's going to open up to approximately 2.1 seconds come the run into the first chicane here, but then we'll see it open up a bit more as they all make their way all the way down to the Mulsanne corner, then down towards Indianapolis, and then it starts to close up all over again. This is going to be some exciting stuff between the two of them. As we see Don Siegel right now in P5, 8.6 seconds clear of Danker, and gradually, very gradually closing down that gap to Kawajo and Tom. The gap now 40.4 seconds. It was 2 laps, or I believe 3 laps ago, 44 seconds, but it's not coming down at a rate at which he's going to close it up to be in the fight come the end of the race. And Danker right now not able to close up to Siegel, but be very happy with how he's performing right now, will the American, as we see Enrico in a very comfortable P7 with Belkin having those 2 major incidents forcing him to make 3 pit stops. And Belkin, he's still got a minute's worth of space between himself and Netta, so he's still got a comfort zone, but he'll know that he can't afford. He hasn't got many lives left in terms of being able to hold on to that P8 should he have more incidents. And Netta in P9 right now will be looking. He'll know that time's coming down, and he'll just want to keep it consistent as he makes his way through the second of the Mulsanne chicane. So albeit a little bit slowly there, the tyres starting to come a little bit off. Now Calypso, of course, being caught up by race leaders, and he's got blue flags. He pulls out, oh goodness me, and Calypso had to react very suddenly there. I think he got caught out a little bit by how quickly Viper was coming through. Oh goodness me, I think Calypso did the right thing to yoink the car off the circuit as much as possible. It was almost as if a shepherd's hook just pulled the car off, to be honest, the way he threw it off. But nice work by Calypso to obey those blue flags there. I think that was going to be very hard on his heart in terms of seeing that and how quickly Viper was coming through there. The difference in approach speed to the apexes, but still he's got it out of the way. No major damage done there. A little bit of gravel and a couple of chips on his Aston Martin, but Devlin safe and sound through there now, as is Viper. And that could have been a little bit tragic for Viper should it have gone the wrong way, as they continue to make their way around the circuit, of course, up onto lap 23 very shortly for Viper and also Muller. And you can see Muller really trying to push as much as he possibly can, fighting the car through every single apex right now, trying to force it to straight line the apexes where he can in order to get as much acceleration out the corners, but it's just not the case. I don't think he's got enough in terms of outright pace on the circuit right now. Meanwhile, in that battle for P3, you could see that gap has opened back up to 4.5 seconds as per the casual routine, but it's definitely come down a lot over the course of the opening portion of this second half of the race. And we see that Tom really pushing hard now, and he's got to try and find a way to avoid any more penalties. He picks up any more, and Joe is going to be smiling all the way to the bank in terms of fighting this one, as they make their way through the Porsche curves. And you can see now that gap is really starting to come down, as we do get an apology from Viper on Calypso there. I think it may be the case that Viper felt he essentially came up too close behind Calypso and almost caused an instant annoying himself, or the fact they were coming through a very tight portion of the circuit. I'm sure that'll be discussed between them afterwards down in the paddock. They're good friends from what I hear, so as a result they won't be having arguments about it, although Devlin may say, Viper mate, you gave me a heart attack of all things. But nonetheless, we can see that Tom right now definitely starting to feel a little bit of pressure off of Joe as we go on to lap 23 for these two, and that gap is now 3 seconds between them. It is coming down gradually. And as our drivers continue to make their way around on the circuit, we see that Muller, of course, now making his way past Calypso here. Calypso backing it off, coming out of the first of the Mulsanne chicanes here to let Muller through. And both drivers making it on their way down towards the Mulsanne corner. They've got a long way to go, of course. And meanwhile, it is really the closest battle on the circuit. It is Tom versus Joe. Which one is going to be on the bottom step of the podium for Lobby A and the first half, and who's going to put their teammate in the better position going into the second round of tonight? The second part of tonight's round, I should really say. As they both make their way now down towards the Mulsanne chicane here, you can see once again how Joe is starting to fall back. And do remember that for Don Siegel, our driver in P5, that after this first half of the overall round, so when we go to Lobby B, which will be broadcasted, I believe, by THG Tom 79, he'll be broadcasting it, albeit he's racing this one, so he'll probably be out of breath a little bit and be grateful for the respite. It'll be the case that Don Siegel, our P5 man right now, is going to be running both lobbies for the purposes of the team of HPSR, so he will be also running the second half because his teammate Evo Tropic not able to make today. So as a result, the Austrian is going to be absolutely exhausted come the end of it. He's doing the full 4 hours, so credit to him, of course, as he makes his way down here and gradually closing out that gap to Kawajo. But again, as we said earlier, it's coming down by no more than about a second a lap, 2 seconds a lap at most. And I don't think it's going to be the case. It's going to be within striking distance unless the P3 and P4 drivers take one another out in the battle right at the end. And speaking of the end, I'm going to take a brief breather, grab a drink, and then we'll come back. We'll give you a summary on the story so far and what to look forward to in the final quarter until we come to the end of Lobby A's 2-hour portion. So, if you haven't been tuning in and you've just decided to tune in, what's been the story over the first hour and a half then? Well, the story has been one of ever-increasing dominance from SDM Viper. Started on pole, had a bit of a difficult start in the battle with THG Muller, the South African driver in P2, but after the first couple of laps and mistakes by Muller, which led to him picking up some track limit penalties, Viper was able to retake the lead and just pulled away with it from that point onwards, and this gap has continued to open up, and Muller has been the one to make some mistakes, whereas Viper has been the one to make less mistakes or less track limit penalty incursions, and as a result that gap is continuing to open up. It's now 24.5 seconds. Muller in P2, well, the story of him has been where Viper has been the successful one. Muller has been a little bit less successful in the battle for the race win, albeit he's been keeping Viper honest. That's the key thing we should point out. Viper has had to really push to open that gap up as much as he has, and Muller has been the one to push as hard as possible and try to bring it down. He's got a 55.3 second gap over THG Tom 79, who in P3 right now, that 4.7 second gap is misleading to Kawajo in P4 because Tom, very strong on the straights but having difficulty through the corners, plus the fact that he pitted 2 laps earlier than Kawajo, or I should really say that Kawajo decided to overcut everybody by 2 laps, and that means with Kawajo's car being suited to handling rather than straights, the BMW M6 chasing Tom down, Tom being in the Aston Martin DBR9 GT1. It means that come the end of this race, the final 10 minutes, we should see our P3 and P4 drivers going to town. Kawajo, of course, in P4. The 2 Belgians have been tooth and nail all the way through this race, and we're expecting a fascinating finale from the pair of them should neither of them make a mistake. And to be fair, the one who's made the mistake so far has been Tom So today. He's picked up 2 track limits penalties over the course of his second stint. Kawajo has yet to pick up a track limits penalty from what I'm aware. Don Siegel in P5, he started up in P3, had a major error on lap number 3, which put it in the wall and he had to get the car repaired, dropping him all the way down to the back of the order. He's recovered to P5. He is very gradually catching up to the battle for P3, but as you can see there on the timing screens, there's a 37.8 second gap between himself and Kawajo, and he's only closing that down by approximately a second to 2 seconds a lap. So I do not think it's going to be the case that Don Siegel's going to be fighting for the podium unless our P3 and P4 drivers have a major incident at the end of the race. Dankert, well, he's been really the best of the rest outside of the top 5, has done a very good job of keeping it consistent and is pushing on in P6, the Mercedes AMG driver, the best of the Mercedes drivers here, ahead of his fellow Mercedes driver of Enrico Playbourse, the Dutchman, who had a very consistent race, and he was in a battle with Belkin for P7 at one point, but Belkin making a number of mistakes, and by looks of things pitting early as well to try and make up for a lack of pace by going for an offset strategy. It hasn't worked, and instead Belkin finds himself 1 minute and 48 seconds down the road now from the Dutchman, and indeed trying to find his way back into this one. Netabas, meanwhile, in P9, the Belgian driver, it hasn't been his day. The Lexus RCF just has not brought the potential that it had at Bathurst, and instead in P9, he's had some good battles with Don Siegel, where Don was trying to recover his way through the field, but Netta not able to get himself up into the battle for the top 5 today. Devlin Calypso, it hasn't been a strong race for the Belgian driver, having gone from the soft to the hard, finding that the hards didn't offer the grip. He's had to go back to the medium after a number of offs, and it's been a very difficult one for him, and he'll be looking to have a better race in the finale in 3 weeks' time. Well, that's been the story so far, and really the big expectation is this battle for P3 come the end of the race, probably within the last 10 minutes, but beyond that the field has spaced out quite a bit, so that's the only real battle we have left to be sorted out of the circuit as it currently stands, unless there's any major collisions or incidents between drivers or just mistakes. So we will wait and see whether anything's going to happen, of course. But place your predictions now, folks. Who's going to be on the bottom step of the podium? I think Kawajo may have something to say about it and achieve it come the end. Tom's putting in a very good stint right now, but as we show you with his telemetry, you can see he's got a little bit less fuel in the car. And also the front tyres in particular are now starting to show considerable wear. Meanwhile, Karajo has got more fuel available to him, which means he can go more aggressive in terms of fuel consumption at the end. Plus, also those tyres are more balanced in terms of wear for the time being, and the balance will only start to tip towards the fronts once he gets into the dirty air and has to go heavy on the brakes versus Tom. That's really what we've got to look forward to right now, but of course anybody could make a mistake around this very long circuit at Le Mans, and it is a case that everybody needs to keep their cool and try and just bring the car home right now. And exhaustion will be a factor, of course, but they've got to do it for their teammate who will be taking over from them come the end of this 2 hours as we move on to Lobby B. But as all of our drivers continue to push around, of course, with 24 minutes remaining, and we take a look at the chat, we see the prediction from Pepsi GT that he's got his fingers crossed that Tom will be able to keep hold of P3. But we will wait and see. As we can see, Tom and Cal are both sharing the same camera lens now, and indeed it is the case that Cal can smell the fumes from Tom's car up ahead. He'll know that it's there. It is there for the taking. He's only just got to get there close enough in order to get within a striking position. But of course, once he starts to get closer and closer, he's then got to find a way past where he can hold on to the position, given how strong Tom is going to be once they get back onto the straight. And that is the big question, of course, is where will he get the move done and where will he be able to hold on to it as they make their way around onto lap 25. And our race leader, Viper, well, that's 27.3 seconds. I think Muller might have had a little bit of mistake somewhere again. Let's just take a look at those lap times. Viper with a 3:56.5 on that lap, whereas Muller with a 3:58.9. So both drivers now starting to feel a little bit of tiredness kicking in. They're no longer running in the 54s like they were earlier on in the second stints, but Viper definitely keeping that consistency a lot higher compared to Muller right now. As we do see, they make their way down towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes here, and then Tom making his way out onto the Mulsanne straight run now with Kawajo behind him. And I believe we do have a driver who's just come past. Hold on a second, what has happened here to Don Siegel? He's dropped all the way down the order. He's got engine damage. I did not see this. Where has the Austrian picked up that damage from? Well, I'm here, right, we're seeing the replay here, and he had that damage go to the Porsche curves. I'm hearing in my ear right now that he picked up the damage coming out of Arnage, so he repeated, effectively, the mistake he made on lap number 3. It's come back to halt him, and that means, ladies and gentlemen, Dankert is now up into P5, and as long as he can keep it together and not put it completely sideways, he's going to be coming home the best of the rest in P5 right now, with the American, with Don Siegel making another mistake. And this also means that Enrico Playbourse now is promoted into P6, with Don Siegel Siegel in the pits. He's creeping there right now. And you've got to imagine from Don's perspective, he's going to just put a fresh set of tyres on it. You have to go hunting right now. But this is a shock turn of events. And remember what I was saying earlier, that at any moment somebody could make a mistake. Well, it's happened. And that is the case that Playbos is going to have to literally try and hold on. What will be the gap between himself and Don Siegel? That'll be the question that's on his mind. Well, he's got a 34-second gap to Dankert, so I think Dankert will be thinking to himself that he is extremely safe from Siegel unless he makes a mistake of his own with 21 minutes remaining. Siegel's still in the pits right now. He's put the tyres on. He's gone to a fresh set of tyres. They've repaired the car. He has got 27 seconds to close down on Enrico in the space of 21 minutes. Now, it being approximately 4 minutes a lap, let's say, that is going to be 5, perhaps 6 laps to do it. He will need to take out of Enrico the best part of 4.5 seconds a lap to do it come the end of the race here, to be there within striking distance on the final lap. Can he do it? That will be the big question. Well, Don Siegel's got it all to play for now if he wants to get back into that top 5. And remember, he is going to be racing in this again afterwards. He'll be racing in Lobby B. So I think right now it will be a case in his mind that he's got to simply settle it down and figure out where it's going wrong. But that is a shock to the senses as we see that our battle for P3 is inching ever closer right now, albeit Tom ahead by 3.2 seconds, but of course that oscillating gap, it's misleading, and really I think the overall gap between these two right now is really about 2 seconds overall as they make their way down towards the Porsche curves. As they make their way down the curves here then, you can see that Camacho just continuing to press on, and we look further around on our circuit map, no other major drama at the moment, and they make their way into the corners for the 25th time of asking, and Camacho will now start that close-up procedure again. 3.4 seconds is the gap going into the curves, and watch how it comes down so rapidly through this set of corners here. It's already come back down by a second before we get to the final left hand, and this is the corner where Tom struggles so much by comparison, and it's come down by 2 seconds, so the gap overall is about 2 seconds between them as we see that Camacho press it on once again. They've now come into the forward chicanes here. And as they make their way through, of course, now Tom will start to open that gap up because he gets into the power sectors. But remember that Camacho will come back at him out of Tetra Rouge, and how close will he be as they go for the right-hander onto the Mulsanne straight on lap 26. I reckon it's going to be just outside of slipstream, but it will be the case that even if he's in slipstream, Joe will know he'll fall out of it very quickly, and then he's got to find a way to get even closer, which he'll do it because he's been doing it previously. But again, Tom right now will know that the pressure is on him. He cannot afford to make a single mistake, because otherwise, if Joe is pressing on him from 15 minutes remaining onwards, that is a huge amount of pressure, and he will not want that. He will not have wanted this gap to have come down as rapidly as it has. And as they make their way out of turn 6 here, you can see that Joe is almost into the slipstream zone as they go into Tetra Rouge, and this is where he'll close up if he's going to do it, and he is close enough now, and look how close, and it is a repeat of what we have seen time and time again. Tom goes a little bit wide, or gets it a little bit wrong coming out of Tetra Rouge, but this time he got it much more wrong. Camacho defending to the inside of doing the weave much like Tom, but you can see he's aware of the fact that Tom will have so much on slipstream, and he doesn't want to give Tom any overspeed whatsoever. He wants to be there so he can attack him and then try to break away, and you can see he's weaving behind him here. He is frustrated, is Joe. He just wants to get past Tom, but of course he needs to calm it down and realise, you know what, you will get him if you just stick with it, or have the best chance of getting him. But Joe all over the back of Tom as they make their way down the second third of the straight. You can see Tom doing his little weave to break the initial toe, and Joe waving the car around as if he's trying to shake his head as if to say, oh come on Tom, we know the game now, we don't need to keep doing this. As they charge down towards the second chicane, then they make their way on their way towards the braking zone, and you'll see they come down hard on the anchors as they always do. Joe using as much width as possible, Tom using a little bit less width, and this is where he wants to be. He wants to be so deep into the rear of Tom's slipstream zone that as a result of that, as they come down towards the Mulsanne corner now, he will not be dropped anymore by Tom, and this is critical for Joe, who we ride on board with right now. Because the thing is, if he's this close and he's able to stay this close down to Indianapolis and then out of Arnage, then it will give him the best possible opportunity to try and go for something into the Porsche curves or come up into the forward chicane. You can see that Tom really struggling. In fact, the brakes there, but Joe goes a little bit deep. He just gets the overspeed there, and the dirty air just sucks him a little bit deeper into the corner he would like. And this will give Tom just enough space to pull away, enough to be safe going for Indianapolis into Arnage here. But these two are so close. It is unbelievable that after an hour and 45 minutes they could be this close still, and they continue to press on all the same. And Tom, of course, now breaking away, what with Joe missing out on the 6th gear by comparison with Tom. The Aston Martin just having such a strong 6th gear. Now they come into Indianapolis, and it's the time for Joe to start looking at closing it all up once again. And he's got to think about it. He's got to try and keep his cool a little bit with regards to how he gets this done. He can't think about Tetra Rouge. He knows that Tom's strong at Tetra Rouge. He's got to find another corner where he can get it done as they make their way out of Arnage. And we can see that Tom making a little bit mistake there, getting a little bit of snap oversteer on exit, but it hasn't cost him any time as he simply can get on that throttle nice and easy. Up front, I can tell you that Viper is 31 seconds clear of Muller now as he goes wide off of the curve there. I think that's going to be a little bit of a track limits penalty as he comes onto the Mulsanne straight, although it was a little bit of a deceptive camera angle. No, we were right, that's a half-second penalty, and we can see that Muller just backing things off now, and it will be the case that Tom, well, as we look back from Tom, you're going to see here how close he's going to be caught by Kawajo. Ready for it? Kawajo is quite far back, right, and you're going to get a face form BMW in 3, 2, 1, and there is that BMW, and he's already looking to the inside into the push because he'll put him on the outside, coming around out of the Fulani, but he goes around the outside, does Kawajo. My goodness, that was brave stuff. Tom defended to the inside, and Joe just saying, fine, I'll send it all the way round, Tom. I do not care, and that is brave. But will Joe be able to hold on to it, of course? Because we've still got the power sector of Sector 1 now, and as a result of that, Kawajo will now be vulnerable to Tom as they go on to lap 27. But that was some brave stuff. We'll definitely check that back in a minute. But now Joe is going to have the pressure all over him as they come up towards turns 1, 2 and 3. The Dunlop chicane awaits. Will Tom come back at him? He looks to the inside for turn 2. He's going to be on the outside for 1, but he'll put him on the inside for 2. Does he go for on the brakes here? No, he doesn't. Instead, he stays behind. Now, Joe needs to drop him coming out of turn 6. He needs to get that gap open enough to about a second come the run out of turn 6 here to be able to get it done. But that was one mother of a move as they make their way through 5 and 6 then. And will Joe be able to pull away enough? The gap is 6 tenths, 7 tenths. He needs it to be more than a second to get this done as they make their way up into Tetra Rouge, and they come through the right-hander here. And you can see that Joe goes full attack into the corner. And what about Tom? He's not able to get a good run through the corner. The gap is 1.5 seconds. But now the Aston Martin's going to come back. Will it be enough from Tom, or will it be the case that the BMW has finally broken the spell of the Aston Martin? And as he finally got away, they've still got 2 more straights, of course, after this one. You can see that gap is coming down, 1.3, 1.2. It is coming down at a major rate of knots as they come into the first braking zone along Mulsanne. And you'll note that as it comes down towards a second, then 9 tenths, Tom just needs to be 7 tenths of a second behind to get into that slipstream zone. Well, 7.5 tenths to be specific. But he's not able to get the best of runs out of the chicanes, and this just gives Joe a bit more breathing room. That gap isn't opening up as much, of course, because it's only 2 corners, not a whole series of corners. But Tom will start to close it down again. I think he'll be in that slipstream zone for the purposes of the run to the Mulsanne corner here. He will close it up, and he'll get a bit of tow come the final portion of this second run. As you can see, he's now in the slipstream, and that gap is coming down incredibly fast here. But Tom needs to nail this second chicane. He needs to get it spot on. As we see, he literally slides in behind Kawajo here. He is all over the back of his fellow countryman, and he's the closest he's ever been in terms of this return and this retaliation here as they make their way now down towards the Mulsanne corner. And immediately you can see Joe staying on the inside here. He'll want Tom to go all the way round through Mulsanne if he's going to go for it. As they charge down, building up speed, they go side by side, and Tom has got around the outside here, and Joe will know that this is not ideal because now he's got to do it again at the Porsche curves, but he's done it once, and Tom will know that he can defend against that now. He can put the car in the centre of the final part of the Porsche curves to be safe as they charge down towards Indianapolis. But let's take a look back at that phenomenal move from Kawajo. So riding on board here, you're going to see that Tom has a very slow run as he does through the left-hander coming out. And watch Joe, he's just going to go on the inside and sweep it all the way around the outside of the 2 of them. And that was some phenomenal brave stuff from Joe to know that he had the grip to do that. As we look back to them now, making their way down towards Indianapolis. Who's going to come out on top by the end of it? Of course, we've got 13 minutes remaining. It's the closest thing happening on circuit right now. I can tell you, in the battle between Don Siegel and Enrico, in terms of chasing after Enrico, he's got that gap down to 17.6 seconds, but he's not closing it down fast enough to get himself in an attacking position on the final lap. We'll continue to monitor it, but right now the big battle is between these two for P3. The race lead, well, that's all been said and dusted, although Viper's picking up a couple of penalties left, right and centre now, which could drop that gap down a bit. But we can see that Tom, again, only 5/10 of a second ahead of Carol Joe as they come into the Porsche curves. And Joe, again, will now need to find a way to get around Tom. And in fact, he's going to go for it even earlier this time into the left-hander on the second part of Porsche curves here. And as a result, that is a very, very quick jump on Tom there. And I don't think Tom was expecting that whatsoever. I think Tom, in fact, was caught unaware of the fact Joe was going to come at him so quickly, and as a result now Joe is really going to have an opportunity here to break away, because you think Tom's going to have a bit of acceleration up towards the Ford chicanes here, but nothing like that. He's not going to have as long a run, and this may give Joe the ability to open up more than enough of a gap coming out of Tetra Rouge down onto Mulsanne. I think if he wants to be safe come the Mulsanne corner at the very end of the Mulsanne straight, he needs a gap of 2.5 seconds, and Tom picks up a 1.5 second penalty for track limit. Oh no, and I think that's the light at the end of the tunnel gone for Tom, because unless Joe makes a mistake now, he's effectively safe. The tyres, of course, of Joe's car have more life in them. He's still got more fuel if he wants to use it, and that, I think, is the nail in the coffin, unless Joe makes a mistake now, or Tom literally goes full send on it and says, to hell with it, I'm getting that place back, regardless of what's left of the car come the end of it. But let's take a look back at what happened there. So you're riding on board then with Joe, and you're going to see that there's a major drop here from Tom. He goes a bit deep into the corner, and that's what gave Joe the ability. Tom went too deep into the corner, and as he tried to come back into the left-hander, Joe was just there, and Tom just did not see Joe coming. That was phenomenal stuff to capitalise. And Joe up into P3, and now charging down towards a podium finish here. He'll be very pleased with this. What a brilliant move. But of course, don't count Tom out yet, because if Joe makes even one mistake, Tom is going to be there, of course, and when he sees that mistake come, you know Tom is going to be like a piranha to blood in the water. He will literally sniff it out and look for that podium back. He's not out of this fight yet, folks. He's got a lot of determination. He's one of those drivers within the the WTRC community who everybody knows is an absolute fanatical driver, and when he wants a place back, he will go for it. But with that is crazy, and with 10 minutes to go, looking around the field, what I can tell you is that Dan Kurt is comfortably in P5 right now, 24.5 seconds ahead of Enrico Playborst, who's got a 16-second gap to Don Siegel with 3 laps to go. I think he'll be more than enough safe from the Austrian who is chasing after him. Belkin right now in P8, but this has not been a great day at the office for the British driver. He's still pushing on nonetheless in P8, and then Netta in P9. 2 minutes and 22 seconds behind Belkin right now and not able to catch up. And then Devlin coming into the pits and just parking the car up. I think they're boxing and retiring that car. They're not going to be bringing it out again. I think Devlin has retired at the 80% mark of race distance there. So we have had our first retirement of the race, and we've still got 9 drivers running. But right now, Viper continuing to press on here. And really, what can we say about Viper? It has been a very dominant display. Although I think we've actually got a driver who spun out, I believe, up at what is... And my apologies, I think we had a driver off there up at the Indianapolis corner. Did Belkin have an off, or was that just a glitch on our radar there? Because it looked as though the driver was parked up on the corner. No, it wasn't off from Belkin. Oh, he very well collected that car. In fact, Belkin, he picked up a 1-second penalty for cutting the apex curb at Indianapolis, but a good catch by that man. Are you sure he doesn't play cricket? That's the big question there, because that was a phenomenal catch. But really, what can we say about Viper? It has been a phenomenal drive from the American, and with, well, what is expected to be at least 2 more laps after this one to go. I think right now he'll be turning down the wick a little bit and just saving the car for his teammate, Cy Potter, who will need to carry on in Lobby B and bring the car home as well on that top step if he can. Although Cy Potter will be up to that challenge, I could assure you. He's got a lot of motivation as Cy. As we look back at Muller, Muller has been keeping Viper honest all the way through. It's just been unfortunate he hasn't been able to be as close as he would have liked after the first couple of laps. But still, this P2, should he be able to bring it home in P2, he'll be best pleased with. But as we look back to the battle for P3 right now, you can see with Karajo coming out of the Porsche curves there. That gap stabilising in the region of approximately the 4-second mark right now, although Tom may be trying to mount a comeback here. Joe will feel secure right now, but he has still got the best part of 2 laps to go. He'll be doing 30 laps come the end of this one based on our timing approximation. And I think Joe at this point will turn the wick down just a tiny bit on the final lap. Not right now, but on the final lap, he'll go to turn the wick down just to give himself the opportunity to bring the car home nice and comfortably. But we will wait and see, of course, as our drivers continue to press on. And they've still got some time remaining. But Tom, meanwhile, well, he's got to try and find a way to get back into this. But again, to give you an idea on that last lap, Tom with the 4:01 at .599. Meanwhile, Carajo set a 3:58.6. So Tom obviously had to burn that penalty. That's what cost him the lap time on lap 28. But he will be trying to get in there. But I think that gap is becoming unassailable unless Joe makes an error. But Joe has just been flawless throughout in terms of making the track limits, not making mistakes into the corners. He's just got everything right today, and that has been the difference between the two of them. The tunes have been poles apart, but it's been about the mistakes, and Tom has just been caught out by them, because we expected, if he hadn't picked up those track limit penalties time and time again, there was a total of 4 of them if I remember correctly on the second stint. We expected the 2 of them would have been going to toe approximately about 4 minutes to go, but instead it came a lot earlier, and as a result of that, Tom has in the end up in the position that he's in. But it's not to take away from the fact that Tom has not run a really strong race, and I think anybody who says otherwise is a detractor and doesn't understand the full story of the race. Tom has had a very difficult one because he's had to work a car which has been tuned for the one thing, the straight line speed, and whilst it's worked, Joe has just had so much more confidence to run in the dirty air through the corners and mount the pressure versus the Aston Martin driver. But still, they've got another half of the race, and of course their teammates would love to adjust that story come the end of the second 2 hours when they jump in the cars. As we see, Danker has picked up a 1-second penalty for track limits at the Dunlop chicane there. That's not going to compromise his race too much. He can afford to burn that very gradually. Enrico, meanwhile, we see the gap between himself and Don Siegel now down to 10.5 seconds. So Don is closing that gap up quite rapidly. To give you an idea, on the previous lap, Enrico with the 4:01.3. Meanwhile, Don Siegel, the Austrian driver there, with the 3:56.0. So as a result, I think Don might be in a position, should Enrico make any mistakes, he might be in a position to attack come the very end of the next lap, the final lap on lap 30. But I don't think it's going to be something that's going to happen immediately unless Enrico makes a major error. And really the story of Danker has been one all about consistency and just bringing the car home. He was a driver who had to jump in at the last moment for his team, with their Lobby A driver being excluded due to incidents on the previous races from what I understand. But still, Danker has jumped in and done a phenomenal job for the team, and I think in fact he'll be getting a good round of applause from his teammates, indeed from a good number of supporters. I for one very pleased to see the American jumping in and doing a fantastic job here. As we see that Enrico as well, it's been a story of just consistency. He's had a couple of little incidents, has Enrico, but still the Dutchman has done a solid job throughout, and he'll be pleased with that. And the one driver I think who's going to be kicking himself about the fact he made a great recovery drive after a mistake on lap number 3, but then to make the same mistake twice and pick up engine damage during the second instance of the mistake, the Austrian Don, where he's going on to do the other 2 hours after this one, and he'll be looking for a more consistent, more fluid race in Lobby B, because at the moment it has been a very difficult one. But still, it's been one of those cases for the Austrian. I think he'll learn from this one and carry that momentum forward into the next half of round number 3. As we see Belkin, meanwhile, it's been a difficult one for Belkin, but he did say going into this he wasn't expecting too much. He's expecting if he was going to work a result, it would be on strategy. But with the mistakes he's made, particularly down towards Arnage and Indianapolis, it just hasn't been his day. So P8, I think, is the best he could get. At least he'll still pip Netter to line, and Netter, it's just been a difficult circuit for the Lexus RCF driver. The Belgian just hasn't been there today compared to at Bathurst, but still, that's not to take away from him. I'm sure he'll bounce back in the finale in 3 weeks' time. And Devlin Calypso, well, retired the car at the 80% mark, but again, it has been a difficult day at the office for Devlin, but we look forward to seeing him back in the finale. Well, with 3.5 minutes to go now, Viper will have one more lap after this one. All our drivers now will know that they can start really turning the wicks down. The only driver who won't be turning the wick down at this point, as we see there is a 1 second penalty for Coward Joe for track limits at Dunlops. This is the first penalty we have seen from Joe track limits wise all race. He's finally succumbed to one, but with the gap he's got and the fact that this is going to be his final lap, he will only complete 30 laps. He can afford to burn that, most likely coming down towards the Mulsanne corner, alternatively say up towards Arnage or the Porsche curves. He can afford to burn it there. He can just be safe. He's got more than enough of a gap over Tom, who has picked up a further penalty coming out of Tetra Rouge. So both drivers now starting to feel that tiredness, and I think it's the case for the pair of them that are going to be settling for these positions as we've got 2 minutes 40 to go. Of course, Tom will see Coward Joe off in the distance and think to himself, I want that place back, but I think it's a bridge too far for the Belgian today, as he makes his way down towards the braking zone for the first of the Mulsanne chicanes, putting on the anchors of course, and now sliding the car through the corners before going on to that second third of the straight. Making his way downtown now. So you see Viper getting it very snap steery there, coming out of Arnage, and he won't avoid put that in the wall. Can you imagine, ladies and gentlemen, if that had gone in the wall with only 2 minutes to go? I'm not trying to put a curse on him, I swear. That would be a heartbreak for everybody involved. That was close from Viper. I think right now, if his teammate's not on the radio, we've got a yellow flag up at the Porsche curves here, so I'm not sure what's happened. In fact, I think Netta has just had to rejoin, has immediately pulled out the way. We're going to see what's happened to Netta. There's a little bit of a mistake there. So in fact, the car was parked up in the wall and he's picked up engine damage. So I think what's happened is he's run out onto the gravel and then to the grass, and the car's spun into the wall through the corner and he had to pull out the way. So Netta will be bringing that car home wounded, but Viper very close to putting it in the wall at Arnage there. And Muller behind him right now. I think he'll be praying for something like that to happen right towards the end, as he's going to go round towards the Porsche curves right now. But Coward Joe, 56 seconds down, our second place man, gradually burning off that penalty, as is Tom. Both of them will be burning their penalties at a glacial pace. They'll know that they can afford to burn them very gradually, even coming out of the final corner to cross the finish line. But it will be Viper who's gone on to the 31st and final lap. He'll be one of only 2 drivers to do a 31st lap. Muller will be the other one, and it will be the first of our drivers to come home, I believe, to complete their race distance. Will be our third place man, Coward Joe, as he makes his way right now into Arnage here, and he's still got a small chunk of the lap to go here, as Miller has crossed that timeline to go on to lap 31. So commencing his final lap, the white flag is out, and we look further around the field. We see Tom as well making his way out towards the Porsche curves right now, and gradually burn off that penalty, and Dankert coming down towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes. But really, the story has been one whereby he didn't have the car for the straights. It wasn't the best of qualifying sessions. But in the end, the tune that he ran on the car in the BMW M6 was one all about the handling rather than the straight line speed. What he couldn't have on the straights, he had more than made up for in the corners. And with only 4 more corners to go, 2 chicanes to go, it's going to be the case that Coward Joe will be coming home in third place in the end, as the timer clocks down right now. I believe we have got a driver coming across that start-finish line. It will be Belkin who comes across first in P8 on lap 29. Congratulations to the British driver. And then coming home in P3 to secure the bottom step of the podium, a valiant effort, is the Belgian Coward Joe. He comes across the line now, and behind him is his fellow countryman of THG Tom 79. A great effort from the Aston Martin driver. Didn't quite have it in the end, but to come home in P4 was a brilliant effort, and his teammate will be happy with that. And then the next driver to come across the line in very short order, well, not in very short order, in fact, he's still got the best part of a minute of the lap to go, will be Dankert. We're just looking a little bit further around to see where everybody else is on track. We've got Viper right now coming down towards the Mulsanne corner, and Muller making his way down to the second of the Mulsanne chicanes. And Enrico, well, he's on his way just behind Dankert right now. And in fact, we've got Don Siegel who's only 2 seconds behind, so we will keep an eye on that as Enrico goes a little bit deep there for Indianapolis. So we could see a change for P6 in a very short order here if Don's able to nail it through the Porsche curves, as Enrico is really struggling on those worn tyres as Don Siegel is chasing after him. And will it be the case that the Austrian is able to recover P6 right at the end? Well, I can tell you now that Enrico will not want to have seen this. 1.2 seconds is the gap, and now he's got the hardest section of the circuit in terms of cornering to come. as they make their way through. Of course, we will have Devlin coming home in P10. He retired earlier on, as we did mention. But who out of these two is going to come home in P6? Will it be Enrico? Will it be Don? They make their way through the Porsche curves. You can see that Don is getting ever closer. And as they make their way up into the left-hander here, coming up very shortly, Don's going to be all over the back of him. He makes a look for a way through. As we can see, there's a little bit of contact between the two of them. And coming out the final corner is Dankert to come home in P5. Congratulations to the American driver. But as he makes his way across the line, we have to switch back to Enrico, who I think in the end has held off Don, although I'm not sure. There seems to be some major contact between the two of them or something, because Don doing a bit of rally cross. In fact, oh goodness me, Don just missing the rear end of Enrico, and Enrico will come home in the end in P6, and it will be Don in P7 who gets reset on track to a little bit further back. So Enrico holds on in the end to P6. But I think Don might have a word to say about that. We will take a look back at that as we've got the time available to us once our our P9 driver comes across the line. Don coming home then in P7. In fact, so we're going to take our race leader across the line. We've led it pretty much from start to finish, minus the opening 2 laps. But coming through the final 2 chicanes right now is your race winner for the first half of tonight's 4-hour endurance race in Lobby A. It is STM Viper winning by 34 seconds. What a brilliant effort from STM Viper, giving a good foundation for Cy Potter to go into the second half of tonight. And Muller making his way through the final set of quarters right now. The South African has given it his all. He'll have earned this P2. A valiant effort from the South African. He'll be best pleased with this. He'll know that he had the potential to put more pressure on Viper, but it wasn't there over the course of Lobby A. But it'll be down to their teammates to continue the battle in Lobby B. As he makes his way through the final chicanes, then they come out of the final corner and Muller comes home in a deserved P2. Well done to him. And then we have got just Netabas coming around, but we're going to take a look back very quickly to see what happened in that battle for P7. So right on board with Don here, you see there is contact, so he's trying to find his way through, but he hit the back of Enrico, and Enrico was on the apex there taking his race tonight. Now this is where it kicked off really heavily, and I think Enrico's on the left, and then Don just simply snap steered into the wall there. I think Don, I'm not sure what happened there, but we know that Netta has just about to make his way through the final couple of quarters. So it'll be the case that Netta brings it home in P9, the final of our drivers. Well done to Netta for bringing the Lexus home in P9, and that completes our racing order. So congratulations to all of our drivers as Netta spins it across the line, but to our race winner in particular, SDM Viper from the United States and the V12 Vantage GT3. Well, there are your race results for Lobby A, subject to any steward's inquiries, of course. SDM Viper bringing it home with the win, 34.1 seconds ahead of THG Muller. And the bottom step of the podium being taken by Cower Joe. The top 5 being rounded off by THG Tom 79 and THG Dankert 77. And the fastest lap was set on lap 17 by SDM Viper, a 3:53.895. Quite close to his pole lap, in fact. That is the story of the race. And a brilliant effort by anybody. And now we are going to open up in case anybody's up for some post-race interviews. And there, just give our drivers a brief moment to take a breather. I think our race winner is up for an interview, so we are going to invite him to a party chat. And also Muller as well. So give us a second, folks. We will just need to invite, firstly, it'll be SDM Viper into the commentary box. Welcome, Viper.
Hello there.
So just 2 seconds before we get started, can I just double check with the Twitch chat? Can you hear Viper, guys?
Testing, testing, testing.
It's normally about a 10 to 15 second delay. Yep, they can clear you. They can hear you nice and clearly. So, firstly, congratulations on the race win. How does it feel to have won Lobby A by 31 seconds?
It's going to set up C Potter nicely for the next second stint. I was a bit worried about those DBRs with Mueller and Tom there in the race where that M6 of Kawa in split between me and Mueller there. That also really helped there as well to build up the gap as well so we could keep them busy and I could just be pulling away there, right?
Yeah. I do have to ask though. It wasn't all easy for yourself because Muller at the start seemed to be quite close to you, and in fact was putting you under pressure on laps 1 and 2.
Yeah, it's the pressure curve is a lot different compared to when he's about 4 or 5, maybe 6 seconds compared to when he's about a half second, and it's you you get pole position, but once you start the race, you're like, okay, it's like how could I fend off the DBRs uh, before the handful of labs start to count up. And because I think I figured out was that the DBR is going to have much more tire wear, and the fact that they were using a lower gear in some corners where I was using a higher gear, it's just the way how the gearboxes were set up in both of these cars. The DBRs are set up for a faster straight line speed compared to the Vantages where they're better in the corners, but they lack a little bit in the speed there. So the mindset was to just see, okay, how could I fend off Mueller there for the first couple of laps, and just get back there, and it paid off. So glad to have won the lobby A, and it'll set C Potter up nice for second stint.
Oh, definitely. And I do have to ask, with regards to the very end, coming onto your penultimate lap, there was this little moment coming out of our Narge where we saw you just get on the power a bit too soon. Did that just make you think, oh no, have I potentially put it in the wall 2 minutes from the end?
I was only really safely sound that I was going to win the stint pretty much until I got to about the Porsche curves there. But yeah, that I our entry in the second stint there. So that's what I was kind of worried about. But all in all, to get first by about 34 seconds, I believe, it's gonna pay off huge for the second stint there. But all in all, it was a really good race. So.
Oh, it was absolutely fantastic work by yourself. And I believe Cy Potter's just about to start jumping in the car and getting ready. But with that, we'll leave you to it. Congratulations on the win. And actually, one final question we do have: Blue Moon Bay Infield A in 3 weeks' time. Yay or nay?
Nay. I am not very fond of the road course there, but I just I'm very good at the oval there because I'm more of an oval sort of guy. But retrospectively speaking, I've done fairly well at the Blue Moon Bay uh, road course there, so it's going to be interesting. It's been a while since I've done a race there on the road course there, so it's up to you're going to see what happens, I guess.
Oh, well, we look forward to it. I definitely, for one, look forward to seeing whether you can make it another win, but we'll wait and see.
Cheers, mate.
Well, with that, congratulations on the win once again, and now we'll let you enjoy watching your teammate continue the fight in Lobby B.
I'm probably gonna go get a shot of tequila, my friend. Celebrating a little early there.
Oh, well, no, thank you for joining us for the interview and have a lovely evening, sir.
Yep, you too as well, mate. Cheers.
Take it. Alrighty, folks. Well, with that, we're now going to try and get in touch with Muller. Just give us 2 seconds. We'll invite him into the lobby. Might just have to give him 1 or 2 minutes to join. Welcome, Muller. I'm not sure if your microphone's coming through, Muller. Good evening. Now, just give us 2 seconds. Just want to make sure that the Twitch chat can hear you. They're just being a little bit slow to respond at the moment, so might just need 1 more minute. I'm not getting any response from anyone, but I think we are good to go all the same. So, firstly, congratulations on P2 in Lobby A. Got to ask though, are you happy with the P2, or do you think there was a bit more out on circuit today? Yes, we did see that in the opening 2 laps, the battle between yourself and Viper, and that's something Viper talked about when we just spoke to him, was the fact that you were putting quite a bit of pressure on him very early on down the straights. But it seemed as though you started to just let a couple of track limits penalties creep in, and that's what was the difference between the two of you on that first stint. Yes, it's one of those unfortunate things where I think with regards to the penalties, once you pick them up, it's sort of then you try to overdrive to get the time back that you've lost from the penalties. But I think there was a point, probably around lap 5 or 6, where you started to just settle down and settle into a rhythm because we could see the penalties started to disappear, and you were sort of maintaining the gap. It was around 5.2 seconds, I think, on lap 5. Oh, indeed. And from that point onwards, it seemed as though the two of you were constantly trading lap times. We could see it, and the first stint in particular, the two of you, the gap would creep up to 6 seconds. They would come back down to 5.5. They would go up to 6.5, come back down to six, say 5.8. Just take us through what it's like in that situation where you're really able to chase down someone who just seems to have the same pace as you. And so coming away from the sort of battle with Viper in the end, given the fact that you weren't able to catch up to Viper, although he did have a very near miss with the wall at Arnage on the penultimate lap, which I think a lot of us were wondering, was he going to put it in the wall and give you the win by taking out his engine? What are you looking forward to with regards to Blue Moon? Do you feel that's a strong track for yourself, or one of those ones which you'd rather skip? Is it because you've just never sort of looked into it, or is it one of those sort of voodoo tracks, as some people like to call them? Well, fingers crossed for you, but we look forward to seeing what you're able to achieve in 3 weeks' time. But until then, congratulations on the P2 and thank you for joining us in the interview box. That's no problem at all, and I look forward to seeing what you can achieve in 3 weeks' time. You too. Alrighty, folks. Well, with Muller covered, the last driver who we're going to be interviewing this evening will be our P8 finisher of Belkin, who we'll just be bringing in now. And with regards to not being able to hear Muller, we'll fix that for next time. I didn't want to stop Muller midway through his interview once it was fixed, but you could probably tell what we're talking about. But welcome, Belkin. Belkin, can you hear me? You there, Belkin? Oh, brilliant. No problem. I can hear you as well, and hopefully we can hear you on the stream. um, right, and nobody. So I'll just double check with one of the guys on the stream if we've got anybody there. Well, nonetheless, what we'll do, if it doesn't come through for any reason, we'll fix it. We'll fix it next round. All the same, in fact, there is a quick fix we can deploy now. If you go to the party chat, and then go to party settings. Yep, that's the one. 100% we'll be able to hear you.
I thought there must have been a setting somewhere that someone's not clicking. I reckon I haven't done it, so I'm new to all this. It's all fine.
That's no problem at all. So, firstly, difficult race today, P8 overall. Just take us through it, because I knew going into the race, you were saying to me that it wasn't going to be an easy one today.
No, I think in like the team chat, we knew that this was going to be a hard race for us in the AMG. They just don't have the speed, and I don't think we quite had the setup right. Says who's going to be racing Lobby A about now has already said to me before the race he's just going to have to change his braking lines, and the car's very slidey, and we thought we'd be able to do a one stop today, but I very quickly noticed that maybe it's just because I'm racing a bit harder against people that I was good, like we needed to do the two stops. So it was a hard race, but I came in thinking eighth. I'm happy with eighth, and qualified in eighth, and I kept eighth. Maybe would like to be chasing seventh a bit harder. At one point, we were chasing for sixth. So, but yeah, it was a difficult race. But it's one of them ones where we just got to move on now to round four, and it's all experience for our team anyway.
That's very true. And just take us through. So, given the fact that you were in a sort of for quite some time in the race, you ended up in a bit of a no man's land. How did you keep yourself focused? 'Cause it's very difficult around Le Mans, particularly when you've got not really anyone in front of you and nobody behind you to keep pressure on you. You end up in a sort of, well, I'm just here now, the circuit, I'm all alone. What kept you going to be in that P8 all the way through?
I think I was just trying not to race backwards. Obviously, one of my goals was to try and beat Now. We obviously had a bit of a spicy ending in round two. So I knew I was like, he's kind of one that I wanted to beat. And I don't know what his thoughts on the race were, but he seemed to not be having it easy in the Lexus either. So I kept looking, and I could see kind of that I was keeping the distance away from me. So at that point, I could just race forwards and just trying to keep getting under 4 minutes a lap. I was struggling all through practice to get the 3:59s. So my goal really was just to get a 3:59 in the race, and then just kind of bring it home and try not to do too much damage. And I had a bit of a slip up with my race strategy. Even though I switched to the two, I went in for a stop a bit earlier than anticipated, a couple of laps, and accidentally hovered over the X button and clicked it to not fuel any fuel up. So had to pit again just to finish the race, and kind of threw me a bit more. I had 3 or 4 laps. 18 to 21 was a bit of a downer for me, but just picked it back up and had plenty of fuel to just absolutely go for it. And but yeah, it's just, I think it was just racing like I was practicing. I wasn't racing at that point. I was just going for a nice casual Saturday afternoon drive, and I think it just relaxed me a bit more. To try and remember everything that we get coached on and stuff like that, to just stay relaxed and keep all four wheels in the right direction.
Definitely makes sense. And indeed, every minute you get out on the circuit is all good practice and experience for the next race. But with this race complete, obviously your teammate's going into the second half right now. Firstly, how do you think your teammate's going to get on?
Well, he's incredibly quick. I mean, he races on a controller and I'm on a wheel, and I have no idea how he does it. He makes it look so easy. So his confidence is a little not going into it, but hopefully he can shape that with a good start, and a couple of good overtakes. I think I'm hoping he'll be the fastest AMG in Lobby B. It's always going to be tough against those Astons. They're so quick down the straights that you just have to get in the slipstream and hope for the best. And then when you get round to the Porsche curves, that's where we have the advantage, but not enough of advantage. So hopefully he can keep it home and make up a few positions and not do what I did and stick at eighth. But he's incredibly quick. I mean, he's on this track. He's been 3-4 seconds faster than me all throughout training. So I think he'll do a lot better. Just hope that he can take it as just experience. And if he does end up in a no man's land, he can just keep it focused and just bring home whatever he's got. And hopefully we'll keep moving up that leaderboard, even though we're a race down. I'd like to think that we're kind of showing people that we're not just here to make up the numbers.
Definitely not. I mean, the fact you picked up 19 points from the first race, and you're going to pick up good points again tonight, assuming all goes well in Lobby B. You're not here to make up the numbers, and that really leads me on to my final question. Blue Moon Bay in Field A in 3 weeks' time. How do you feel about it?
I feel a lot better if we're doing it anti-clockwise. I'm not sure what way we're doing it. It's one of those ones where it could bite you, and it could be great. I think our car will be a lot more suited, other than Le Mans, so that's why we're kind of using this one as experience, and next one we want to come fight in. Life hopefully won't get in the way of the next 3 weeks. That has done this for round 3, so can get a lot more practice in, like we did with Bathurst. So I'm eager for it. I'm looking. I think we want a strong finish. Um, I want I want to get above 7th. I want to be chasing for that 6th and 5th. Hopefully, some more guys will be coming back, and we'll have more of a full lobby. I know there's been a lot of issues and stuff that's been going on this week, so there'll be a bit more to battle with. But I'm it's all new. It's all experience. I think if we can just keep the progress up and get as much practice in as possible, I think I can't see us slipping up like we kind of may do tonight, because our cars will be hopefully really competitive again, like they were at Bathurst. And I'm quite looking forward to getting at it. And I've got some some more guys that I'm like, right, I need to beat you now, because I could have been close to beating you last time, and if I maybe didn't mess that up, and um, just keep the consistency up, I'm looking forward to it. Um, but we'll find out when we get to first practice. Have a little break, and end of the week get on the track and start practicing.
Indeed. Well, we look forward to seeing what you and the team were able to achieve at Blue Moon Bay. But until then, hope the practice goes well, and we'll see you again in 3 weeks' time.
See you, mate.
Thank you for joining us in the interview box.
Thanks.
Well, that's 3 sets of interviews. Firstly, with our race winner, SDM Viper, very happy with his performance, although not looking forward to Blue Moon Bay in Field A. Then with THG Muller, feeling there was a bit more out on the table today, but still he'll take what he could get and move on to Blue Moon Bay, which is a bit of a voodoo track, not really raced there before. And then Belkin, who finished P8, but still put in the valiant effort to bring the car home there and got what he wanted. It was the result he was targeting, and we look forward to seeing what he and the team, the new team to the group, to the series, are able to achieve at the finale in 3 weeks' time. So, what's the story then? 3 weeks from now, we head to America for the Blue Moon Bay Infield A finale. But until then, I've been your host, Paul TX141 Walsh. If you have enjoyed the live stream, do let me know and let the WTRC series organisers know. The organisers being THG Tom at 79 and also THG at TSO 40. But until next time, stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, stay on track. Good night.